Two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm your host, Ben, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rex. And, Rex, we a team did get to sing Champione on Sunday, and it wasn't Arsenal. I think that'll probably be our leading off story because really it was Man City's week in many respects because they smashed Real Madrid in the second leg to reach the Champions League final. It's the second time in 3 or 4 years. I forget when they played at Chelsea. And they, frankly, I remember after City beat I think Everton. You saw Pep having like two fingers, like two more games, two more wins, and turns out that was the last game they needed to play to win it because of what happened on Saturday. So sorry to say that, Rex, but
Mm.
we'll get your takes on how you feel of how you feel Arsenal's season had. We'll get your takes what you felt on Saturday, and I guess that said, welcome back, or yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to be back, man. And this is the penultimate week of the EPL. So, this weekend coming up, they're all going to be on the same day and on the same time, which kind of sucks. I hate that part about the last day. But yeah, I mean, it's understandable why they do it. But yeah, man, get ready to have like 3 or 4 TVs out, computers out, because if you want to watch all the games, you're gonna have to have multiple devices because they're all on the same time and they're all on Sunday. So we got to figure something out to do Saturday to watch. But I'm excited. I'm excited for the relegation battle. We've been talking about that the last couple weeks, and that's it's crazy that the season literally starts in August and it's coming down to the last game to see who goes to the championship and who stays in the Premier League for another season.
And it is good that at least we've gotten something to take us to the last day because the title race is decided. I fear the top four race has been decided with what's transpired in the last couple of weeks. Liverpool kind of helped out with that with what they did versus Aston Villa, which we'll definitely talk about as well. And we'll get started with Man City and Chelsea, but before that, we always do a story of the week, and one thing I do want to say is, City. We'll take a little time on this. I mean, City did beat Real Madrid on Wednesday, the reason why I want to say that is on something happened with Real Madrid on Sunday. That this is worth discussing. So, it was in their league, in La Liga, and there was a negative incident involving Vinicius Jr. And Valencia fans in the stands, basically chanting a clear racist message. I think it was "monkey," and it was like the whole Carlo Ancelotti spoke out and said it was the entire like stadium. He never like seen anything like that. And then Vinicius went on and spoke out on Instagram and basically called Spain a racist country, saying it's not for the first time, the second time, or the third. Racism is normal in La Liga. The competition considers it normal. The federation considers it normal, and the rivals encourage it. The championship that once belonged to Ronaldinho, Ronaldo, Cristiano, and Messi belongs to the racist. A beautiful nation which welcomed me, which I love, but which has accepted to export to the world the image of a racist country. I am sorry for those Spaniards who disagree today, but in Brazil, Spain is known as a country of racists. I am strong and I will go all the way against the racist, even if it is far away from here. And that last line turned out to be a little bit more than just kind of him ending a message. He started to actually threaten, because his contract's running out. This is, yeah, I guess we'll kind of get started. We'll get started here. It's not just the right thing, the humanitarian thing to do. If that what he says there is the image that they're putting out, at least in Brazil or elsewhere, is that this is a racist place. This is a racist country, not just Real Madrid, just like anywhere in Spain. And I know Italy has had some issues in the past as well. And it's just from a dollar perspective, at least for the health of the league, the future of the league, they've got to do something about this.
Yeah, especially if players are going to leave because of it. And I was reading that this is the eighth reported incident in La Liga in just 2 years. So that's an average of 4 every year, which is every season, which is an insanely high number. Compared to other leagues. Yeah, I mean, and yeah, it's not. I don't think it's really a surprise to you and me and Alex and our buddy Jeremy, part of the other two of the reserve squad, because we've been seeing this for a while. Because Jeremy was talking about someone throwing a banana at Danny Alves at
Yes.
Barcelona in
Mhm.
2013 or whatever, and that wasn't the only time a banana was thrown at a player in La Liga. I think it happened a few years after that too. So yeah, it's not surprising to us because we follow the sport for many years, and we've seen those incidents come out of Spain for a decade. So, but yeah, I mean, something has to be done, and I mean, I guess for me, it would be just take away the fans. So
At least,
Valencia's next couple home games, put them
Valencia
behind closed doors.
Yeah, Valencia should not have
Ugh.
fans. I agree with that because it's not just one person throwing a banana. It's an entire
Yeah,
crowd. It is tens of thousands of people, which is that's what makes this different, in my opinion.
yeah,
And it's not like it's only in those places. Really, it's a problem everywhere. Um, but
yeah. It's not just like at Valencia; it's
even
everywhere. And
even in England, there was some pushback when people were kneeling and driving, a message to that.
yeah,
But this is why they do it. There's a whole like, oh well, why are you kneeling? No one's racist anymore. It's 2013. No, no, you do need to spread awareness. And the other point to that is it's not for people that already set in their ways, their Stone Age ways. It's for anyone coming up, for the next generation to see that hey, this is not okay. And another thing
mm,
too is I remember when the kneeling was happening. Uh, I heard someone saying that young kids were starting to kneel before they were playing
yeah,
their pickup games and whatnot in England,
yeah,
and so that's the reason why you do this. Um,
yeah.
but
Well, on the other side too is like I'm sure there were a bunch of kids, at Valencia Stadium when this happened, and they're all
they
looking
see it's
up at the
okay,
adults
right?
doing this.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it just breeds another generation of the same kind of racist behavior at games because they see the adults doing it and they think it's okay or whatever. So yeah, Ben, I think well, if it's just one person, you can just they can go on like the stadium camera feeds and find the guy and ban them. But when it's the whole stadium, just take away their home games. Make them play behind closed doors at home,
and the league is
and that'll hurt the club too because they won't get that money in their pocket.
president has not necessarily instilled confidence that he's the person to handle this because he's shot back and basically attacked Vinny for making either false claims or false because they opened investigations or they asked him to show up to a hearing that he ended up missing. I mean, he is a player.
Yeah,
It's not like
yeah,
he has
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of free time during the actual season. But I mean, this is the reason as well why it's big. So it's not Vinny threatening to leave. Mbappe signaled solidarity, and I think that was significant as well because when you think about it, it's only the player that Real Madrid has tried to lure it to the club for like 5 years. Um,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest. I've always found it weird how it was almost set. Everyone like any kind of reporting, anything that was close, any both French and Real Madrid or Spanish media, they everyone assumed that it was already pen to paper that Mbappe was going to join Real Madrid, and then out of nowhere, now PSG gave him more player power. It was always weird how all of a sudden that stopped, and I don't necessarily know if this was in the back of his mind, but if it's not just in Brazil, Vinny said, people in my country look at Spain as a racist country. I'm curious if that's kind of been a sense, with other players or
Oh,
outside
I'm
it.
sure.
So again,
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
it's if that point of view is out there, if that's the image that's being displayed, I mean, they seriously have to do something about this. And again, another reason why it doesn't necessarily give you confidence is it was only back in January when uh, Atletico fans had like a doll of Vinny basically hanging off a bridge, and apparently
Ugh.
nothing came from that. Like Vinny Jr. has actually um, had an interesting, well, I shouldn't say interesting, had a really tough or a horrid time in for this past season, and basically it stemmed from him like dancing. I think as something
Huh.
as stupid as that. But I mean, you look at Madrid's roster. I mean, they have Vinny Rodrigo, Militao, and that's just Brazilian. They have Endrick coming to them soon. Chouamini and Camavinga are basically going to be their midfield anchors for the next 6-8 years. They're trying to attract Jude Bellingham. These are black players. And just what happens if all of a sudden they decide this is not worth it? And especially, I mentioned Endrick, this youngster that they have in Brazil. If what Vinny said is true, and the president of Brazil Football Federation basically echoed or basically sent a message of support as well. How long are we going to experience, in the middle of the 21st century, episodes like this, one we witnessed once again in La Liga? There is no joy where there is racism. Skin color can no longer bother. This is the president of the Brazil Football Confederation. This is a serious ordeal.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just from a business standpoint only, if some of these really, really talented players stop going to La Liga, then obviously, everything is going to suffer business wise in La Liga because you won't be able to attract that top talent. I
100%.
mean,
Yeah.
like ticket sales would probably drop. Maybe TV rights are taken away. So I mean that could definitely be something that could possibly work. It just depends on how much talent would be willing to not only leave La Liga but not even go there. Even if some teams would offer them ridiculous amounts of money, but I don't know. Yeah, Ben, it's interesting because if you start seeing players refuse to go to La Liga teams, then it becomes really tight on those club owners on their pocketbooks and the ability to attract sellout crowds and things like that. So it's gonna be interesting, especially if that happens. It would be interesting to see what the owners do. They'd have to figure out some way to fix, not necessarily even fix all this, just start to have a plan in place to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I'll end with something Carlo Ancelotti said, Real Madrid's manager, basically, because he did what the La Liga president failed to do, which was lead. Today has been a sad day at Mestalla. I guess
Mhm.
that's yeah, where a group of fans have shown their worst version. It is time to stop talking and act forcefully. Racism has no place in football or in society. No to racism anywhere. It's a simple message, but that's all the La Liga president should have said. And
Yeah.
the one lasting point to kind of say on this is there's weirdly been kind of a cohort, at least online, that has started to kind of warm up to the idea of maybe a Super League wouldn't be the worst idea because all of these leagues are really cooked anyways outside of England. England has this like monopoly when it comes to TV revenue. And
Yeah.
it's stuff like this where I don't feel sorry for them anymore. I used to kind of sympathize a little bit. Now in La Liga did this to themselves. They allowed Real Madrid and Barcelona to have like 90% of all the TV revenue, and that bled all the other clubs dry.
Mhm.
And then you see stuff like this. I mean, it's obviously not great, going forward if Spain starts to be the Spanish football deteriorates. But it's gonna have to take something for them to hurt for maybe there to be some change. I don't know. But
Mhm.
yeah. Anyways, it's not great to get started on that, but it's definitely something we needed to talk about because Vinny kind of leaving that message out there. Where he what did he say at the end? Um, let's see. Oh, I will go all the way against us, even if it's far away from here.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's signaling that if something isn't done, he is threatening to leave. So.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, 100%.
All right, and we'll move on to Man City and Chelsea. This nothing really happened in the game, so there's not a ton to really talk about the game itself. Though there was something interesting that Chelsea did, but I mean, I guess like the main thing was because of Arsenal not being able to beat Nottingham Forest, that did clinch the title, and we basically saw um, what do you call calling of the guard, like kind of moment when team before teams play. I guess when you greet the champions, that was the kind of lineup that Pep went with, a standing of the guard or whatever you call it. Because it was Rico Lewis, Calvin Phillips, Sergio Gomez, Mahrez, and Foden. I guess. And Alvarez, I guess, can get a couple games here and there. Walker and Akanji and Laporte was the back line. So even like for their I've made, jokes how, I didn't think necessarily City was as deep as people have said. That's looked like a terrible take, because you look at the bench and basically everyone that played against Real Madrid. That's like the strongest bench maybe ever.
Yeah,
And,
it really is.
I mean, the only thing to talk about, I guess, here was, Phil Foden playing in a little more central area. Palmer actually looked okay,
Cole
going
Palmer.
against,
Yeah.
Azpilicueta. But this was just kind of a training ground exercise. It seemed they did score a good goal. They nearly scored a second one after, but it was called off with Mahrez and with Chelsea. Chelsea have just been a mess the whole year.
Mhm.
I was little upset or kind of disappointed that Lampard didn't run with something a little more inventive. As Laqueta, that I mean, you tried Lewis Hall as one of the wingbacks spot. Why not try something else? We saw Ruben Loftus-Cheek played in the middle. I think he maybe could have tried him at wingback, and I think it would have been interesting to see Enzo and Chukwuemekana, who came on a little bit in the second half, who looked all right. I mean, Chelsea did have a couple decent moments. Enzo, I thought maybe played his best game. It's not necessarily going to show up, but you can definitely see that there is a player there. You just need to find a way to complement him, because what they've
Hmm.
done is you don't really have a destroyer next to him, and Ruben Loftus-Cheek isn't good enough with the ball either. And then it was just I thought it was a training ground for them as well. I mean, they did force Ortega into like 6 saves, so there's worth saying that, but this was really, really not a whole lot, so we'll kind of get started
Yeah.
with Man City. Um, I mean, the topic the takes to really start off with uh, it's, City winning is not really surprising, but how they won it, I do think, especially given, what happened, at they had just lost to Man United. They had drawn, to Nottingham Forest. They had a weird stretch in February. They'd lost to Spurs at one point. And that was when we were like Pep was starting to experiment with this, three at the back with this like fake wing back or fake center back, whatever you want to call it. He tried it with Rico Lewis, and it didn't work with Rico Lewis. Um, and the change was really trying the same kind of thing, but playing John Stones there. And after that, that really is when we started to see a different City side. And
Yeah.
I always figured the number eights on the wings, the Grealish experiment, either Bernardo Silva on the wing or even Mahrez. I didn't think it was going to work, and because basically what he's done is he's got technical players everywhere that play in half spaces that can go anywhere on the field, and then he's got Holland and then center backs. It is something that we haven't really seen. Pep kind of has kind of changed this up a little bit, and yeah, it's at least in the league it has worked.
Oh, absolutely. And it's worked in Champions League too so far. And
Hmm.
yeah, just the ability to rest all these really good players and still get a win. And I mean, like Julian Alvarez has, I think, 17 goals in all competitions as the backup to Holland, who has like 40 plus.
Yep.
So it's crazy, and they crank out goals, they crank out results, and they always seem to kick it up a notch when it comes time to the later parts of the season. So yeah, I don't know. Pep has this team well drilled, and they know what they're doing, and they're on a roll. And then, I mean, it could be a trouble winning season for Pep and Man City. That wouldn't matter as much as that Champions League that's been so elusive to City and Pep at City. That's what they really want, and they have a real good chance of winning that this year.
I mean, I mentioned Stones, and it really does start with playing him inverted, and they basically made him a false center half almost. So we've seen Arteta kind of do something interesting with Zinchenko. We've seen Klopp kind of move on to this with Trent. But it's different because they're not center halves, and center halves usually can't do what Stones is doing. So teams aren't necessarily going to be able to replicate this. You're going to need to find someone because Stones has a size to win aerial duels next to Rodri. It's made the midfield significantly more compact. And because of his ability to actually read the game, he's become basically just a typical, CM, and a very good one. And you saw versus Real Madrid, it seemed Madrid just suffocated under constant pressure. in that second game. They couldn't get anywhere near the ball because Stones was kept pocketing, finding pockets to kind of help relieve pressure. You couldn't really press him, and it just seemed Cruz and Modric really really aged in that game. And Stones was kind of the anchor. Bernardo Silva and Kevin De Bruyne got the key goals for Real Madrid. But really, the main reason why they were suffocated was because of Stone's positioning. He's also playing Kyle Walker as the basically as the third center back. Kind of was able to limit Vinicius Jr. a little bit, in isolation, and that's kind of been the thing in the past with Pep's teams. Is it seemed they've always been good in possession, but those few moments when maybe they did lose it, maybe there was a transition moment, there was a chance to maybe go at them a little bit. We've really seen that not necessarily happen since the switch. I remember thinking when Arsenal played them with Saka, I was like, "Oh, well, there's maybe a chance for him to kind of do something 1v1." And Saka did not have his best games versus Man City, and neither did Martinelli. You
Mm.
really didn't see
Yeah.
wingers get the best of that Pep side or of that City side. So yeah, it's I mean just Gundogan and Kevin De Bruyne, that's not necessarily a surprise, but they definitely helped in how this happened. And Ilkay Gundogan, it might be a free agent this summer. I saw he might
Yeah.
even be
Crazy.
linked to Arsenal.
Mm.
And then the selling off of Cancelo. Well, I guess he put Cancelo on loan. The
Yeah.
selling off of Jesus, Sterling, and Zinchenko, I did feel like was going to bite him, and really it didn't. And then in general, how they've adapted to fit Holland, because that's been another change that's happened this year too. Uh,
Yeah.
he came in, and everyone knew he was going to he was always going to be in the back shoulder. He was always going to make runs, be there for when there was a cross into the box. Um, we saw a little bit towards the end. He was progressing a little bit more. He was dropping deeper to help with link up. He looked like he improved his touch over the course of the season, and we saw him start to create a little bit for others, and even saw him used as a decoy in some respects. And so he's improved Holland's game as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, to one, I guess the I mean the thing to talk about them is this is something that Jeremy's kind of talked about. He said that Pep and Klopp have both kind of been almost rigid. This 4-3-3 shape that they've done. They both have kind of latched onto all these years. What it really is it's very rigid. You have your six stays in a spot. Your RCMs or whatnot. Your midfielders kind of stay in a zone essentially, and you don't necessarily move a lot. And it seems what we've done is Pep and Klopp have both basically dropped that this season, almost accepting that a different landscape requires a different style of play. Um,
Mhm.
and it seems like it's too easy for teams to defend against that. You need to manipulate space by having players float in different parts of the field. And so creating spaces, it does create spaces for other teams to attack. So you still need to be able to defend those spaces that you're leaving. But this is what we've seen from the City team. And again, it's not easy to it's easy to say, but it's not easy to replicate because it
Mm.
requires technical skill from your midfielders and defenders in a way that to play that way, and it's really not easy to find. So because how they beat Real Madrid was they had Kevin De Bruyne kind of in a free role. He would flow out it wide to create overloads, and you'd have Bernardo Silva kind of cut inside. Bernardo Silva was supposed to be kind of the wide player, and he was just like occupying in the half spaces, and it just felt. Eventually, you thought Man City weren't necessarily going to be able to play this way with having that width, and yeah, again that's just that was where I was wrong. But
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. They've been incredible this year, though, and I mean, it did look like width would be a problem at the start of the season.
yeah.
But Pep figured it out. He figured it out quickly, and he figured it out. And the team's humming now. I mean, just playing ridiculous at the moment when it matters most. It's insane.
I mean, what do you think maybe was the turning point in the season? Because I was kind of struggling a little bit with this for me. I mentioned that Spurs loss. I know that was a low point. Um, I'm in between here because it was either I don't know if you remember the FA game versus Arsenal, But Arteta actually went with a kind of a little bit of a shuffled lineup where Pep really did throw out everyone. And they only lost
Mhm.
that game 1-0. That basically gave City kind of a mental advantage, I thought maybe
Mhm.
over Arsenal. Um,
Yeah, Ake scored that goal, the only goal that won it. Yeah.
'Cause I'm like, Martinelli and who I think he started Trossard. Martinelli came on, later in the second half, and, it seemed like, Arsenal kind of gave it a go a little bit towards the end there. They had that draw versus Nottingham Forest, but I'm curious if it maybe wasn't a game at all. Because I'm trying to think. I don't think they lost a game. Maybe they drew somewhere. I don't think they lost a game once the news broke out that the FA was opening an investigation into them.
Ooh, maybe. Yeah, I can't remember.
And
Oh, that's interesting.
it's almost like it gave them kind of a mental edge. Like it's yeah, I don't necessarily know if this is how they these players thought or Pep thought, but it's probably not the easiest thing to motivate to where because most of that entire team had just well I guess Holland hadn't, but that team was basically on a two-peat, going for three, going for like 5 out of 6. The
Crazy.
focus we all assumed really was on Champions League, and then
Mhm.
after that, it was like, no, let's just yeah, basically tell everyone to go screw themselves, and let's run a trouble. Let's copy what that famous Man United side did in '99, and it just feels like that. I'm trying to think. Because I thought, like, Pep was kind of screwing around a little bit in the league, that Rico Lewis experiment and stuff,
Mhm.
and all of that really did stop almost after once we got to mid-February, March, and then everything just kind of went into almost a machine-like gear.
Yeah. Well, there was a point too where like Rico Lewis just either it stopped working or he just didn't. He had a bad game, and I think that made Pep drop him as well. And you didn't see him for like a while. I feel like you didn't see him for like a month or so. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, Ben. I don't know. I think you're kind of right. I think you're onto that with the City win over Arsenal that gave them belief that we can beat this team.
Yeah, because like, I guess the other thing you could say was really the win over at the Emirates, when even, City, I think, won that game, what, 3-1, gifted Kevin De Bruyne a goal, I think, from a bad pass from Tomiyasu. And then, it was a kind of a mishmash of I think Grealish created a goal, for Holland, and then Holland actually scored after Kevin De Bruyne created one for him. But in that game, City were actually outplayed, or at least, yeah, outpassed or outpossessed, and Pep actually what he did was he changed things up. He went long to Holland in that game, and I just maybe that was another game where it seemed, Pep wasn't, necessarily as stubborn in his ways. I always thought Pep was as stubborn as Klopp. And
Mhm.
that's my takeaway, I think, for this season is he's shown he can actually change a lot. This side had Gabriel Jesus or Bernardo Silva playing as false nine last year. And then
Yeah.
he's brought in, Erling Haaland, the most like stereotypical prototype number 9 kind of target man, and he still made it work. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. He's been able to adapt multiple times during the course of his career as a coach and as a player too. So yeah, the adaptability, and I mean, you can't be stubborn about it either. You have to like adapt quickly, or else you're gonna get, you're gonna fall behind too far, and you're gonna get fired. So yeah, it's good on Pep to be able to change the way he coaches, to fit like the style of play around the league. If you're too stagnant, things get figured out. It's coaches' jobs to try to win, and they're going to figure things out, and you have to change things up. Keep the rest of the league on their toes.
and they had we don't know necessarily what they're paying Holland in wages. So to get
Yeah.
Holland for 50 million, that's technically what they spent.
Hmm.
I mean, it's not just Holland. They spent well. Bringing in Alvarez, and that deal maybe was already done before. He's obviously looked well. Akanji, bringing Akanji in. Akanji played in so many more games than I was expecting, and I think they only got him for like 19 million
Wow.
from
Yeah.
Dortmund, and he was able to play center back. He was also able to play out wide. And this once they went to like a three back, he was able to play, or even those games when they were playing with a back four, he was able to play as a fullback. Ake was maybe a player of the season in defense for them at one point. He got hurt, and Nate comes in Nathan Ake, and out of nowhere, once you had legs around Ruben Diaz turned into a really good player again.
Mhm.
Ruben Diaz was maybe center back of the season. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
one last thing to say, and this is a little bit more of a clickbaity kind of question, but if City win the FA Cup, and you have the league title, so you get the double, but if they fail in the Champions League, would that would that make this year a failure, or is that too simplistic of a view? Yeah,
Ugh. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know because double's pretty nice. But yeah, I think there would be a piece of Pep that would consider the season a failure if they don't win the Champions League, and I think there'd be some City fans too that would think that. Um, but I think immediately that would kind of be Pep's view, and then upon reflection, give him a couple weeks, and I think he would consider the season a success, just winning the two.
that's
But yeah, I
probably
mean, this is the
accurate.
one they want though. They really want that one.
Mhm.
They really do, and I think they're gonna get it. I think they are. Just 5-1 aggregate against Real Madrid is insane. Like they demolished them, and not just one game, two legs. They demolished them. So, yeah. I don't know. I think Pep would consider it a failure. And then once the sting of losing the Champions League wore off, I think he'd be like, okay, well, we won the double. We got to the Champions League final again. We can easily, bring in some more people, sell some people, and I think we can easily lift that Champions League trophy next season, which is kind of the mindset every time if they do get knocked out of the Champions League. But yeah, I think he would eventually consider the season a success, even if they did lose Champions League.
It is probably going to look a different City team next year. I mean, Kevin De Bruyne is getting
Yeah,
up there in age. Rodri's getting up there in age. Their youngest
Gunningham's going to be gone.
The
Yes.
youngest midfielder might be Calvin Phillips. I think at like 27. I don't maybe Foden can maybe drop into midfield. Yeah, and maybe that can be kind of the replacement. They have Maxine Perrin,
Mhm.
who's starring for Argentina in the U20 World Cup. But he's crazy young. I think he's like 19. So that can't be that can be the idea. I was surprised. I mean, I'm surprised they haven't made a go at Jude Bellingham. Or and the ideas of letting Gundogan go, or maybe you extend his contract for another year. Again, he's over 30, or on that side of 30. How can he necessarily replicate this as well? So
Mhm.
there is going to be a different side to the City team next year. So I
Yeah.
agree. It really is. This is like you kind of put it up. You said it well. Everything that's kind of set up this year is on plate for them. I guess you could say,
Mhm.
because they went through a hot Leipzig team. They one of the aggregate scores, or one of the scores was like 7-0. I
Yeah,
think
they
at
crushed them.
like Holland had like 6 goals in that game. But
Yeah.
before that Champions League tie, Leipzig had basically gone on like a 20-game unbeaten stretch. Uh, we went through Bayern, and went going through Real Madrid. It's not the easiest road.
Mm-mm.
And
Yeah.
you're getting Inter Milan, a team that isn't necessarily doing well in Serie A, at the minute. And you look at it's a it's a high aged team. And, Inter's got a good midfield with Brozovic Barella, is an interesting player.
Mm.
But outside of that, maybe one of the better strikers is Lukaku, and he doesn't even start for them. They've been playing Dzeko, and it's going to be interesting
Yeah.
to see Dzeko versus Man City again, because Dzeko was responsible for their first title.
Oh, that's right.
Everyone remembers the Kun Aguero moment, but before that, Dzeko had come on and had a big goal, I think from a corner kick, to head it in because they were losing like what was it, 1-2? They were
Yeah,
losing by
something.
2 goals in the 90th minute, and Dzeko had the first goal to help with that. Um,
That's right.
so I guess that'll be something for to follow. We'll do some kind of Champions League kind of preview maybe later on, because we're gonna have some time we're gonna have some free time here after this Sunday. I mean, to touch on a little bit with Chelsea. There really wasn't anything interesting, I thought, with the selection. I thought it was a waste to play Thiago Silva as Laqueta. Havertz actually played a better game with having Sterling making runs ahead of him, but I thought it was a mistake not to try Madueke, Datura Fafana, and Chukwuemeka. And as Laqueta, probably should retire after that. Cole Palmer made him look like he made Cole Palmer look like Vinny Jr. In
Mm.
some respects. But I mean, we don't necessarily know what they brought in Pochettino. At least I feel like that's official. But I mean, what do you maybe expect to see them do in the summertime? Because they've got a weird window. They were in the top 4 and they were kind of neck and neck with, Liverpool and City just last year, and it looks like they're, I don't know, out of nowhere, just in a season, they're 5 years away. I don't necessarily know if it's that bad, but, I mean, what do you think they need to do to kinda turn this around?
Man, I honestly have no idea. I have no idea what they're gonna do. I mean, I'm assuming hopefully they'll bring in some players that that Pochettino wants. You know, maybe some players he knows, and they're probably gonna have to get rid of some of these, these players that are just eating up the wage bill, like Aubameyang. They cut him loose. A couple other guys you
Yeah,
mentioned, Aspilicueta. But other than like I legit have no idea what they're gonna do. Conor Gallagher, is he gonna stay? Pulisic, is he gonna be gone?
yep.
I don't. I have no idea. I don't. I think almost everyone could potentially be on the chopping blocks, except for maybe like. I mean, Enzo Fernandez. You could build the team around him probably,
I think
but
so.
a lot
Yep.
of these guys could be gone. Sterling, has not panned out. Last week he was really really good. I thought he might be able to carry that form over. But he wasn't able to. Ben, I honestly have no idea what they're going to do. I really don't. The only thing I would expect is to see a lot of these players leave, and some players come in that maybe Pochettino's more familiar with. Some players that he wants. I'm sure he's going to have a list. It's going to be interesting to see what they do because I have no idea who's going to stay, who's going to go. I don't know.
I'm trying to think. I feel like Pochettino was really good at Spurs and playing younger guys and actually giving them a shot. And Chelsea
Mm,
do have a lot of that.
mm,
This Chuck Mega guy, I'm really shocked that we haven't seen more of him. They got him from Aston
Yeah,
Villa for a pretty good fee, and we just
yeah.
didn't really see him. Maybe he didn't train well. I don't know. But you
Well, I
mentioned
think some other Chelsea fans want to see him too. So yeah, you're not the only one that wants to see him play more.
you mentioned Enzo. And frankly, I thought he was actually quite good. And it's just his issue is he's not a holding player or a cleanup ball winner in midfield. So if you can find a way to find a defensive midfielder that would do that job, everyone's gonna. It feels like you could mention Declan Rice, Casado, or Ugarte, or a couple of these names. It feels like you mentioned these for like I don't know 8 teams essentially. I'm gonna throw
Yeah.
out I'm gonna throw out a different name. That he's already in London now. The only issue is I think he's 28 now. So maybe this wouldn't be a long term move. But I see Paulinho, and I think he was the leading tackler. Maybe pairing Enzo with Paulinho wouldn't be the worst idea because you don't what Chelsea's gonna need is they're gonna need someone that can hold and someone that can win
Mm,
a lot of tackles. Now, Paulinho also gets a lot of red he fouls a lot and he gets a lot of cards, and his age. But I think that's what they need to do. They need to find a way to find Enzo a partner, because I think what they're doing is too often, they're wasting him. He's so gifted on the ball, you don't necessarily want him, running without it. You don't want him trying to track runners. You don't want him to, trying to be like the last man to stop a counterattack. That's just not the kind of player he is. Now, you spent 120 some million on maybe a do it all midfielder, but that's just not the best way to kind of get it out of him. And maybe that fee was a little high. But to be honest, you pair this guy with the right setup and the right team. I think this guy would click a lot.
mm.
So
Yeah. I guess they also need a striker too. They need to figure out
yeah,
something to do at
because
striker too,
bringing in
and a
Kaku,
bunch
but
of wing backs or
and Kaku
fullbacks
is
too.
just kind of going to be another creator.
Oh,
You've got
that's
a
right.
you've got a
He's coming in.
you've got a Yao Felix problem. You're gonna you lose
Yeah.
him on loan. Bringing in Kaku in, it's going to be the same issue.
Mm.
So have they have Lukaku, but we don't think that's necessarily going to be
Yeah.
maybe
Oh
maybe
yeah, they do have.
maybe it'll be Amanda Berger. He was injured the whole year, or just sell him. It's gonna
Mm.
be it's gonna be it was impossible to predict Chelsea this season. They fired Tuchel after
Mhm.
5 games. It's gonna be doubly impossible to predict how they do next season. But they do have an owner willing to
Yeah.
spend, and we don't. I don't know if
Yeah.
financial fair play is a factor for these big clubs or not. Uh,
I
so
guess it's not a thing anymore. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we'll see what they do. All
But
right.
they are going to have to offload some players if they
Yeah.
think. I mean, like Aubameyang hasn't done anything. He's eaten up the wage bill. A couple other guys. So it'll be interesting summer for Chelsea fans for sure.
And we'll move on to Arsenal and Nottingham Forest. Sorry, Rex. Tyrell Owani gets the one goal. I mean, maybe the kind of story to talk about was we did see kind of a different lineup for Arteta. We saw Thomas Partey and Jorginho kind of tried together. Their Partey was a little bit more on the fullback side. It's almost seemed like you tried to create what you had with Zinchenko with Thomas Partey, and Partey's just not necessarily that kind of player. And it didn't. I don't. Yeah, obviously it didn't work out. But I thought it was interesting.
Yeah,
The NBC people were really blaming this kind of performance on Partey. I'm not gonna say he necessarily had a good game, but and it was interesting to see no Tierney. Kirar was tried at left back, with Ben White kind of at the center back. So it was a different lineup. But yeah, watching this, I thought maybe the issue was really Arsenal's attack was just really toothless. Anytime the ball went out
mhm,
wide, it's kind of something that I keep kind of harping out a little bit. But it was just weird to see Jesus again wasn't really able to impact the game. I thought at all, and I thought that was maybe
yeah,
where this came from. And another problem too is the way you're playing Thomas Partey. Thomas Partey is your ball winner. Uh, the goal really happens from Thomas Partey being too far out wide, where Odegaard misplays a pass, and Jorginho isn't able. There's absolutely no protection once that happens. You misplay the
yeah,
pass in the middle of the field, and Morgan Gibbs White is able to just have free run to do whatever he wants to do, and he does a really good job to pick out Awani's run. So, what
Oh
was
yeah, they transition so quickly. Arsenal are getting up the field, and then they lose the ball, and the guys are already up the field, and Nine Farce is immediately like, let's go forward quickly and attack in numbers. And yeah, you have a point about Jesus too. Arsenal fans have been getting kind of not necessarily on him, but they kind of want another like a Giroud type of striker brought in
yep,
to
yep.
to kind of like help the goal drought, if you so to say. But
Because they brought in Nketiah a little bit towards I want to say like the 65th minute mark, so there was still a time for him to kind of come in and maybe change the game a little bit. I really can't remember Arsenal even getting a shot in that second half, or a shot that like really scared Navas.
yeah,
I'll try to look at the stats because really a lot of the best chances did come to Nottingham Forest's way, and Forest only had 6 shots and 2 on target. Arsenal had 11 shots but 3 on target. 82% of the ball, almost 700 passes or 650 passes, and 90% accuracy. But it's just it was very toothless. You never really saw them really threaten or any kind of creation. And so I think we'll
yeah.
kind of get started. I guess we'll kind of just get started with your overall, I guess, like take of the game, and then we'll kind of just move on from there. Well, we'll touch on Forest as well.
Yeah, it was a lackluster display. They looked maybe possibly some of these players looked a little leggy. I think Saka's kind of getting
100%.
pretty jaded.
Yeah.
And I mean I didn't really like the experiment that Arteta did. I kind of thought just give Tierney these 3 games because he's been linked with a move. He wants to go somewhere where he can play. Give him these 3 games. See if he can maybe be a capable backup again next year or push for the starting job. And if he doesn't do well in those 3 games, then you can kind of be like, okay, we need to get rid of him. Um, but I mean, he didn't have the best game last week, but still, I would have just given him these 3 games because it doesn't really, it doesn't really matter if they don't win them because they're not moving from that second place spot. So yeah, I don't know. And then yeah, just didn't like Partey playing in that position. Arsenal fans are getting on him too because he just has kind of faded down the stretch. Actually, he's been linked with like moves away from the club too. I don't know if it's like because of his poor run of form at the end of the season, or if it's mainly just
It's a,
because he's
it's
so injury prone.
It's a
But
high wage bill. I would probably do it, to be honest. And it's crazy because I spoke nothing about his praises the entire year because
yeah, so good.
when
But
he is on his best form, he has been good against the press, and he's kind of a 2-in-1 player. He can hold, he can win the ball back. He's also not necessarily terrible in possession, but I think he's going to be 29, or he is 29 now. So he's going to get closer to that 30 range, and he probably is on a high wage bill. If you're going to get someone like Declan Rice in, it makes sense to me if that's the way they're thinking, and they probably could get Partey off for a decent fee. But I,
yeah,
I don't.
sell him now for a decent fee rather than a couple years later for not much at all. But
And you're right.
I don't know,
The
a
injury
big
issues,
call.
I think, is definitely factoring that as well, because that
Yeah,
was the reason why I think Arsenal I think I picked Arsenal for the third. I'm actually relatively happy about that. A lot of people maybe didn't even have Arsenal in the top 4 to start the season, and that was always in the
Right.
back mind. I didn't think they had someone if something were to happen to Party where they had to miss him for a significant number of time. But
Mhm.
they were able to have him for the full season almost. Um,
Yeah, yeah, he missed, like, I guess a month probably in total this season, so not terrible, but, they really looked a different team without him.
mhm. I mean, yeah, and looking at the chances, probably the best chance I have here did come to Saka. I mean, it was one of the few times where he was able to kind of get behind Lodi. I think Ben White floats a nice ball over the top that Saka is able to run onto. But it's just one of those cases where there's really no one near him, and Saka has to go it alone and try to beat Navas from an angle, and he can't do it. But there was too much. There was too much of that. I thought it just when they were able to get behind, Jesus wasn't necessarily with them. You never really saw kind of an organized, kind of connected attack. I thought it was very too individual, and in some cases it was almost I won't say too scary, too lackluster. I didn't see you didn't
Yeah.
necessarily see Odegaard uh, being commanding or trying to take chances. It just to be fair, they were
Yeah.
playing against a very structured back 11 at times. Forest did not care about having the ball. I think they had maybe 18% of it. But
Oh, yeah, it's terrible.
that is, and that kind of is, unfortunately, I think that's maybe a story as well. Um, when we get to Forest, people are going to praise Steve Cooper for keeping them up, which is considering where they were. Uh, that's probably fair, but I don't necessarily think it's good for the neutral that this kind of football was rewarded. Uh,
Mhm.
he found a way to turn around a very hard defense into a sound block. And he bringing in Felipe in January, having Navas in January, helped kind of stabilize their defense. They did improve some, but you're at home and Arsenal are one of the two best teams in the league. Still, this is 80 passes. 50%. They didn't care about having the ball, and it was rewarded. And so that
Mhm.
is where Arsenal have gotten to a point where you know uh, Liverpool or Klopp's teams have gotten to a point where it's not. You don't see when Liverpool were playing like Firmino. I can see what Arsenal are doing with Jesus, and you don't have an ability to necessarily beat that low block when you don't have Odegaard firing from range. At least,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
or missing Martinelli. That Martinelli miss
Martinelli.
hurt it as well, and then
The
really
early goal too for Forest, because then they could just pack it in
They
and
was able to
defend what
pack
they
it in.
had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so, the thing to kinda touch on here is, we did see some change from Arteta. We spoke a little bit last week that I didn't necessarily I was wondering if we would see Arteta kind of change it up, and we did. So I guess there's worth that saying. We saw Kiwar try that in a different position. Kiwar actually I thought had pretty good recovery pace. So
Mhm.
so there's some of that. He's maybe been, down the stretch, there's been a lot of negatives. I think kind of seeing how he's played has been a little of a positive, for future
Absolutely.
future stuff.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, definitely.
but yeah, to me, it was interesting that we didn't necessarily, we saw Trossard kind of play a wing back or fullback for Brighton in some respects. And we saw him maybe try it more in an 8 spot. I feel like it was weird we didn't necessarily, if you wanted to try to recreate what Zinchenko offered, I thought it was weird we didn't necessarily see Trossard kind of tried there. Um,
Mhm.
then again, I don't necessarily, losing Martinelli. I don't think they had Reese Nelson. I think
Yeah.
he ended up getting hurt. So yeah, injuries definitely did kind of hurt you guys down the stretch. And we mentioned him a couple of times, sidestepped him a couple of times. I didn't mention him last week.
Mhm.
The miss of Sinchenko was everything.
Yeah.
And I think I remember talking to you back in like either January or maybe in November, in those few games when you were missing Zinchenko. Every single time it was clear Arsenal looked a different team when Zinchenko was playing and when he wasn't, and just that kind of
Yeah.
showed up as well because it changed.
Yeah, definitely.
It changed how I think it changed Party's role. It changed Odegaard's role. I thought, and Odegaard kind of missed him a little bit. Um,
Yeah, I think the Saliba injury did the same thing to Partey, that kind of,
that's a good call. Yeah.
missing him behind missing, such a good defender behind him, I think kind of, you know, messed with him a little bit for sure.
Yeah, the Saliba miss is definitely something to highlight and remember because really all of it changed in that stretch and
Yeah.
uh, really it was because that Europe game happened or Europa game happened before the Liverpool game happened before the West Ham game and the Southampton game.
Mhm.
There's too much of a pattern there to not say that 100% that affected because
Yeah,
it wasn't just holding.
definitely.
It wasn't just holding having a poor game versus City. Teams were able to go at Arsenal in a way they weren't before. Um,
Yeah, it affected the whole team.
I mean, it's so it's finally final. I do kind of want to get your thoughts a little bit on just because it felt like you had penciled it in that this was going to happen. I was trying to make the case for you to be a little bit more upbeat. But is there maybe a point in the season that you wish that you could change, have back, or you kind of find that
Mhm.
they overachieved in many respects, and the goal was Champions League at the beginning of the year, and they secured it like 2 months ago. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been a really good season. I think for me, the point that changed everything was Saliba getting hurt. If I
yeah,
could go back and change anything, it would be Saliba not playing in that game. But yeah, I think I mean the fact that they had that 6 or 7 point lead on City and blew it. That's the part that hurts a little bit, But other than that, like, yeah, if you told me before the start of the season that they would finish second, I'd be really, really happy with it. And I think it is something that they can build on, and it's going to open them up to a higher class of players now that they are in the Champions League. That they haven't been able to access some of those players for how 10 years or whatever, however many 8 years, however long they've been out of the Champions League. So hopefully they'll have that going for them now too, and a little bit more money. But with that comes the fact that they're going to have to strengthen their squad with even more depth now that they're going to be in the top European competition. They're gonna have to have more players and a better quality of backup as well. It's like Vieira isn't cutting it; he's not going to be able to cut it in the Champions League.
yeah, and don't. I'm kind of I'm in between on whether I think Gabriel is a Champions League kind of a center back. I'm kind of
Mm,
he has a few games here and there that have been okay, but
mm,
Zinchenko was kind of in that spot to kind of help when it came to build up. I
okay.
thought he was kind of a liability when he had the ball, and his defending in some cases was I thought maybe suspect. I yeah, the Saliba thing is the one to really touch on. I'm gonna go maybe a little outside the box, and say there was a chance for Arsenal to go 3 up on West Ham. I think they were
Mm.
already up 2-0. There was a chance to go 3 up. They had just gotten a PK, and Saka missed it.
Oh yeah.
I
Good
think
call.
because that allowed West Ham to get back in because I think they scored like 5 minutes after that, and then they ended up make it 2-1 a little bit later or 2-2. And, I think that got into his head. I just feel like Saka didn't have the best games down the stretch, and I feel like that was maybe the start of it as well. And so
Yeah.
that's a little negative. One thing I do want to get your take on is because I mentioned him last week is maybe kind of shuffling him out to maybe get a bid for someone like Declan Rice. Is it was weird we didn't see Smith Rowe in any of these games down the stretch. You feel like
Yeah.
when you versus a pack side, you need someone with clever feet, someone to be able to take a chance to be creative essentially, and that is what Smith Rowe to me has offered in the glimpses that we've seen of him, and to not see him at all, I thought was weird, and I don't think that's a good sign.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's a good sign either. And it looks like he could be possibly added to, however much money they're going to pay for Declan Rice. It seems like maybe Moyes wants Emil Smith Rowe and cash. But yeah, I don't know. Because part of me was like maybe he was just so injury prone this whole year, coming off of that groin injury that bothered him.
Yep.
So like you just could never really get consistent game minutes, and you just couldn't get like the rust off, so to say. So yeah, I don't know. He could be gone, and it's unfortunate because last year he had a great year, and it looked like he was going to build on it, and then that groin injury took him out for a couple months, and he was just never able to really hit the ground running again. And it's a shame because there's a good player there. There's a really good player there. And I think if he does leave, I think it's going to show that he is a really talented player if he can stay healthy. But
Mhm.
Arsenal have so many injured players that I think Arteta's like, let's just get them out of here and get some people that can actually come in the crunch time and help us.
And, well, it was, they brought in, Fabio Vieira, that's kind of a similar player. It seems like maybe Smith Rowe would be playing in Odegaard's kind of, preferred position as kind of like that number 10. I just once the Martinelli, loss happened or injury happened, it seemed like the idea was maybe more trust Trossard, and it's never seemed like that Trossard and Jesus kind of front line. I didn't think worked at all. So there is something for Arteta to go back in and kind of go to the drawing board in some respects. But we'll move on to Forest. I think we need to talk about Tyro Irani.
Mhm.
5 goals in the last 3 games. I think he only scored 10 total. But
Yeah.
the goals down the stretch were massive. This is why they're going to stay up. We mentioned that hellish, deep block. He really almost at least 5 of those goals got him points or a crucial 1 point. And looking back, it's going to be, it's going to come down to just winning a couple points here and there. And one thing I thought was funny is he was one of the earlier signings that they made. Um,
Yeah.
they added Emmanuel Dennis, I think the last day of the window in September, and then in January they brought in Chris Wood, and maybe the injury to Chris Wood is the reason why Awani was able to get a couple of run of games a little bit down the stretch because it seemed he wasn't really playing. Ronnie had a couple injuries, I think in February, but Cooper wasn't really playing him till the very end, and I was surprised we
Yeah.
didn't see Emmanuel Dennis more. But Wani was able to make these runs and kind of carry an attack all by himself. Now, the numbers aren't necessarily great, the 10 goals, but to do it for a team that was just absolutely starved of the ball, this was a heroic performance from him.
Yeah, yeah, he was amazing too. He kind of was showing what he did at Union Berlin. He scored like 20, I think 20 goals in the Bundesliga last year.
Yep.
And I mean, I remember at the beginning of the year we were kind of talking him up too. We thought he would score. I mean, we thought maybe he could score close to 20. But yeah, like just I don't know. I don't know. He never really took up the mantle fully. And sometimes he was a bit of a streaky player, but now that he's gotten his chance and he's been consistently in the lineup, he's shown how good he can be. So I think maybe they can kind of build the scoring around him for next year because they have they have some good players in attack when healthy.
Yeah.
Like Gibbs White, some other players. So it's going to be interesting to see. I kind of hope they build the attack around him.
Well, you
And
mentioned
let's see what he can do for the whole year.
You mentioned Gibbs White. Had Forrest gone down, I think someone would have inquired about his services. He got better towards as the season went on.
Absolutely.
They spent a lot of money for him, and it was kind of a
Hmm.
joke in the beginning. But he really showed up. He really showed up when it came big, and he has an engine on him. I didn't necessarily realize, he had. And it was interesting to see one of the weird kind of tweaks that Cooper made a little bit towards the end of the stretch was he was playing Danilo and Gibbs White, and kind of that left Brennan Johnson out of the 11. And I thought this was an absolute howler of a mistake. And it turned out Danilo actually had a couple of goals down the stretch that were big as well. And really the main thing was we finally saw for that final month or so we saw a consistent 11. I when I do these scripts or whatnot, basically what I do is I copy and paste from last week to this week, and then I kind of change what the lineup was. I didn't have to do that for Forest for a number of these the last couple of weeks. So
Mhm.
that that
Yeah,
that
true.
that I think finally helped out. They finally got healthy, is worth saying as well.
Mhm.
Because he finally got Raymond Lodi back. Serge Aurier was able to play in this game. Niakate was out like 80% of their season, and
Yeah.
he came back and had a couple of really big long throw-ins, which helped. But yeah, to go back to an earlier point, is this a good thing in your opinion that they stay up? I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but because whether I'm struggling to embrace a promoted club, staying up. But that said, it's not a typical promoted club. They spent
Mhm.
180 million over 2 transfer windows, brought in 24 players to do it, and the style of play that they've been rewarded with 80 completed passes and 50% accuracy.
Mhm.
I've used the T word. Now, Alex doesn't want me to use a certain word, but I've moved on to calling it Tony Pulis ball,
Mhm.
which is the same T word you could say. Long throw-ins, basically don't play with the ball at all. And it's just it'd be one thing if it was a plucky club, coming in punching above their weight. But if you spend 180 million, the quality needs to be better. Leicester spent like 8 million in total, and Leicester and Leeds are probably going to go down because they tried to score goals this season.
Yeah, true.
And I just think it's a little unfortunate that this has been rewarded. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of just
Mm.
being being I don't lame or whatnot. I mean,
Well, yeah.
what's your take on that?
Well, I think they just wanted to stay in the Premier League for a season, and maybe next year they can kind of show a little bit more in terms of attack. I don't know because like yeah, it's either those newly promoted teams kind of do this and they scrape by and stay up,
It's rewarding.
or they do like the
It's gonna be
Blackpool
it's
thing.
gonna be repeated. That's what I'm trying
Well,
to
yeah, but if you do the Blackpool thing, like yeah, that's great. You get fans and people watch, but
you get
ultimately
you
you
get bounced.
get relegated, and now they're going to go down to League One even. So maybe it is worth it just to win at all cost, even if you have 20% of the possession.
It's just
But yeah, I agree though, Ben. Like hopefully they'll actually just put together some more attacking play next year. I mean, now that they're solidly in the Premier League after that first season, initial season back end, but I don't know. I don't. I mean, I like their fans. Their home
yeah,
atmosphere is
the home
crazy,
atmosphere is I mean that
but the
is
football
that's
is
where the
lacking.
that's
Yeah.
where the romance comes from. The home
Mhm.
atmosphere was electric. It is a club in Nottingham. It's not one of these London-based clubs.
Yeah.
So there's that as well. I mean, frankly, I'm just kind of surprised. At least following the sport for as long as we have, we haven't seen. I kind of talked to Jeremy about this. We haven't seen someone come along, kind of like a like Steph Curry of the league, in some
Mhm.
respects, where you haven't seen someone with like an outside shot ability to punish this. Where you have teams, the goal that Kevin De Bruyne scored versus Real Madrid, for that first leg. I wanna feel like 99% of the players playing don't even get that on goal, and he hits it to a height where, it doesn't even get 5 feet off the ground. It's just weird how
Yeah.
we haven't necessarily seen that come, because that would be a way to kind of punish this, and it's just I don't know, 'cause,
Yeah, yeah. If you can't break through with your playmakers, yeah, a rocket shot from far out, yeah, it could do it. Like a Beckham kind of player, I guess.
like, I'm just if I was trying to create a player to kind of just end all of this entirely, I would have there would be a center back or like a defensive midfielder that just had a rocket on them, and it's just like Tony Cruz, I guess, has this a little bit in his locker, but it's just yeah, because they get so many chances, they get so much time on the ball, and then what do? You try to loop something in, and it's just so packed and congested. It's just one team just playing not to win. We see that a lot in international football as well,
Mhm.
but at least that has I have a little bit more leeway on that because they don't play with each other all the time. To see it resorted at the club level, just that was rough. Um,
Yeah, yeah, true.
but
Mm.
one thing to kind of end with is Steve Cooper, David Moyes, and Gary O'Neill. It helps with the stick with your manager theory. And I should have had belief in my theory because I didn't have faith that Forest's back line could keep enough clean sheets. I was kind of worried a little bit about Bournemouth. And each club has a kind of a different situation. It's worth saying that as well. But I think it
Yeah,
is telling that the clubs that did stick together kind of made it all through, and they're
yeah,
rewarded with Prem football.
yeah, yeah. That's true. Yeah, yeah. Being loyal to your manager for the whole season and staying with them, that paid off for some of these clubs for sure.
And they brought in 24 players, and maybe the best thing to happen was Cooper finally getting Shelby I think got hurt, and someone like Chris Wood got hurt, and he was able to finally play Danilo, play Mangala, and play Tower Iwani. So
Hmm.
yeah, there we go.
There we go.
All right, and we'll move on to Nottingham or to Newcastle and Leicester. This one ends 0-0. Really, nothing happened at least in the game other than Leicester kind of did the same thing. They tried out a back five. I think they had one shot the entire game, and it happened like the 90th minute. It actually forced a really good Pope save. But I thought this was crazy because it sat James Madison. Harvey Barnes was sat with Iheanacho back. That I understood, though he hooked Iheanacho at halftime, and Harvey Barnes did
Mm.
absolutely nothing. So It is what
Yeah.
it is. Newcastle, actually, they were kind of forced to play without, Joe Linton and Willock, but they did get Sean Longstaff back, and, it was I didn't wanna go conspiracy theory, but it was weird how 2 games in a row, Newcastle benefited from, Leicester and Brighton kind of resting, their biggest players in back-to-back games. I mean, this game was hard. It was just Newcastle chance after chance. I think they hit the woodwork 3 times in this game, and, Leicester basically played, the back 3. They had, Johnny Evans kind of, giving it a go. He actually ended up having to go off, but it really the idea was just kind of, get in the way of kind of any kind of cross, any kind of shot, and just kind of be a nuisance and do not care about playing with the ball. And they were able to get a point. This did work for them, but they had one shot, one shot all game, one shot on target. Newcastle at 23-4, and again, this was flat embarrassing to kind of watch.
Mhm.
And again, it worked.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it got him a valuable point. I mean, I was kind of surprised. I was really surprised, honestly, that Newcastle didn't score. And the lineup was a bit surprising to say the least. I mean, no Madison's kind of weird. He'll definitely be on his way out to get relegated, but he might be gone no matter
Maybe,
what.
maybe go to Newcastle. Maybe.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it was weird. It was just, yeah, I agree, Ben. Like, I want them to go for it, but I guess at this point, a point is so valuable
Yeah.
that the coaches are like, let's maybe we'll just go for it on the last day because we need to get a point here, and it's a top four team, I guess. But yeah, it ends up making for kind of a boring game, honestly.
I mean, it was a big gamble, because the Newcastle did hit the woodwork a number of times. Iverson and Dix had a decent number of saves, but they looked so vulnerable on any kind of a corner kick that came in. Iverson actually had a couple like real big whiffs, that ended up letting to really good chances for Newcastle. Um, Maybe the kind of one thing to say is, it was maybe they maybe lucky that Bruno wasn't sent off early in the game. There was a pretty big like studs high challenge that could have changed the game. But
Yeah.
Newcastle, I'm not going to really care about Leicester because Leicester they did get a point to give them some help. But Everton kind of controlled their destiny still. We'll get to Everton. Everton might have to do that without a striker, without Calvin Lewin, which isn't great.
Mhm.
But Newcastle get the point that they needed, and they secure Champions League football, and
Yep.
it is an amazing accomplishment from Hal.
It really is.
Um, you know,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, I do feel like there is a ceiling. I don't think they keep the ball nearly enough. I feel like they really benefited from playing once a week football.
Mhm.
The kind of running that they did. I looked at distance covered, something I came across last night, and Arsenal, Brighton, was kind of the shocker. They were like the third worst. But Arsenal, Man City, and Liverpool were almost kind of even at like the 15-13 kind of range, and then all the teams that had like covered the most distance all year were really the teams that were chasing. I guess being it was something. It was like Leeds. It was it might have been. It wasn't Nottingham Forest. It might have been Bournemouth. It was a bunch of teams at the bottom, and then Newcastle was like third. And so that just means they've been chasing the ball the entire season, and that's fine to do it when you play once a week. I feel like it wasn't a coincidence when they started to drop points, was when they did that cup runs, when they were playing twice a week, and I don't think they have nearly the depth. But that said, they've got owners that we imagine are going to not shy about spending. They did spend 280 million over the course of a year and a half, essentially, and uh, I guess I don't want to necessarily pour water on that because we saw Nottingham Forest have a lot of spending. They didn't really do anything with it. We saw Chelsea have a lot of spending, and they didn't do anything with it. So what Newcastle's done is they targeted the right players. They had an idea. They stuck with the idea, and Howe has done a really good job to adapt the players on his roster to his way of playing. So is worth saying that as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. And I mean, he's definitely in the probably I'd say top 3 or 4 nominees for Coach of the Year
Yep.
among people like like Pep, Arteta, Marco Silva. So yeah, it's been great. And when he took over, they were in the relegation zone. And that seems like a long
Took
time
over
ago
their
now, and
last.
it really wasn't that long ago.
They were last.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and he took over what, last winter? So it really hasn't been long.
No, I think it was, like, sometime in January. Mhm.
Mhm. It's been a year and a half in there in Champions League already, it's crazy.
And they did get there with spending, but they also, you give a team a 220 some or 280 million, whatever it was. I don't I don't think they're going to take a chance on Bruno Gomes. They got for like 40 million, and he was just stuck in Lyon. They did a
Mhm.
fantastic job to identify him. I don't think they would have a team would have looked at Dan Burn. I don't think a team would have looked at Trippier. And it's
Yeah,
just
probably not.
it's been players like Alexander Isak. I think he was expensive too. He was like $80 million. This guy looks almost like Cody Gakpo and Darwin Núñez mixed in like one player. The kind of
Absolutely.
touching ability he's able to do. He can play out wide. He can play as a nine. I don't see a flaw in his game either. And the only thing I'm wondering is why wasn't he scoring 20 goals in La Liga?
Yeah,
I didn't watch
it's a good
Sociedad,
point.
but he didn't have a lot of goals when he was in La Liga or with Sweden. And
Hmm.
that guy has been a massive upgrade or just
Yeah.
addition as well. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, he's been great, and, it takes a little pressure off Wilson. Wilson doesn't have to be the main guy, and if
one hundred
Wilson
percent.
gets hurt, you
We
still
saw
have
Wilson.
goals coming in.
We saw Wilson, I think, have 18 or 19 goals this season. He was able
Mhm.
to kind of like he had he's always had his injury issues, but this was kind of the one season where he wasn't asked to kind of be that guy every single game week, which I do
Yeah,
think helped out a lot. And towards the end,
absolutely.
we actually saw him and Wilson playing together, and playing together
Yeah,
worked out for them. Yeah.
yeah, 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 you were calling for them to play together,
I would agree.
and, the first game, it was, a little but after that, they looked pretty good together.
Yeah, and I regret that. I'm hoping, I wish Howe hadn't, read my mind essentially, because I think that probably is what saved him. Because
Uh,
you remember that, they had that weird game versus Man United. They couldn't really get many shots on goal. Then they played Man City, kind of the same thing. They had a chance to beat Man City. I thought they actually outplayed Man City.
we'll start to dry up a
They
little.
had right. They had a little dry patch, and we were wondering, well, how is Howell going to find a way to instill that confidence again? And he did. We didn't see Almiron necessarily firing for them, even though he had some injury issues a little bit later down the stretch. But yeah,
Mhm,
the only thing I'll say is they need to find someone other than Bruno to be someone good with the ball at their feet, someone that can pick those passes. Trippier, I don't necessarily know how you can do a whole season with him again because he's getting older. I don't.
mhm.
He played every game. It seemed like that back line played every single game week. They didn't really
Yeah,
have
it
injury issues at the back
definitely
line. So that
yeah, for the most part,
I
yeah.
think that helped as well. I mean, the only one thing I'm thinking about is, and this is funny because I usually don't like false nines. I do look at someone that if they're going to try to kind of recreate a little bit of what Klopp's side had in the past. They played 4-3-3, and they actually do kind of run the same ways that I that the 2017-18 whatever Liverpool side did. Is to do that you still need a Firmino like player, and if there isn't someone on the market, I do think it's Yao Felix. Um,
Yeah, maybe.
So you could, I would be interested to see if they'd maybe look at that, because it seems like Alexander Isak can actually play on the wing side, and it's not. I'm not. I kind of sometimes I go against false nines, but the reason why is usually when teams are playing that they don't have a striker to play ahead of them to play and cut to cut inside. You would have that with someone like Isak. I think Callum Wilson can play out wide if you needed to as well. So an addition like him, I think would be interesting. We'll see what they do with Champions League football. Like you said, it opens the doors that they haven't necessarily had, and especially with the owners and spending that they have. Newcastle, this is scary how quickly it's happened. But
Mm.
if they get the next window or two right, it's going to be them that's challenging Man City,
They could be
not
the next Man
Arsenal.
City.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
and then with Leicester, like you said, the draw doesn't kill them off. I mean, they didn't have a single shot in the first half. The subbing off Iheanacho off for Madison, I thought that was weird. They finally brought on Daka, but they did it for Vardy.
Mhm.
It was very I want to say pragmatic or tactical, anti-football. I guess
It
you
was
could say.
pragmatic,
But
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the weird they do have a chance because Everton have
Yeah.
to win and maybe do it without Calvert Lewin. I mean, what do you if they go down, this is I think this is a bungle of the highest order. You look at their squad, it just doesn't make sense. Other
Mhm.
than
Well, yeah.
they've conceded so many goals. Why they stuck with Danny Ward? Iverson hasn't been great, but I think he has been an improvement. If you
Yeah.
had maybe
Yeah.
started January with him, maybe this is different. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. But what they do have going for them is they're going against West Ham in their last game, and West Ham
Yep.
is probably going to be. They're not getting relegated, so they're probably going to be looking ahead to their Europa Conference League final against Fiorentina. So they might be resting some players. They might be looking ahead because ultimately this game for them doesn't really matter. So Leicester have that going for them at least, and I mean, I would say they seem on paper to be a much better team than Everton, but Everton has Bournemouth, so and Bournemouth doesn't have much to play for. So I don't know. It's gonna be really exciting. And I guess I guess that other team is not out of it. Leeds isn't out of it either.
Well,
They could potentially get out.
the funny thing about Leeds is, you mentioned West Ham. The 11 that David Moyes went out with when we get to that game, that was shocking to me because Rice played in that semifinal. The only player that rested, I think, was Antonio.
Mhm.
To see Rice, to see Paqueta, to see Jared Bowen was just a giant fu. I thought to Sam Allardyce, who managed a West Ham at one point. I
That's
thought.
right. Yeah, he did.
And
Yeah.
you're right because that first fight Fiorentina, I think is like 3 or 4 days after the final after Sunday.
Yeah.
We're not going to see Declan Rice, Paqueta,
No, you probably won't see Bowen.
Bowen.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sam Allardyce gets it twice because yeah. So
Yeah,
that
and
that that
and Leeds have Tottenham, so they definitely have the hardest opponent out of all those three teams
but
on
because
the final day.
it leads doing a job on Tottenham. Obviously they're gonna have to improve somehow in defense. I don't see how they can keep Kane out. But that won't be enough. They would have to get help. They would have Everton. I think Everton's the one that controls their destiny. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah, I think so too. Yeah,
uh,
they're just barely out of it right now. So
and then I mean Leeds and Leicester I think are on the same point total. So if both win their games, I guess it comes down to goal differential. I don't know who would benefit there. Maybe Leicester, but I don't know. That would assume Everton getting a draw versus in their game, or maybe losing. Um, you mentioned Bournemouth. We'll move on to Man United and Bournemouth. The game ends 1-0. Goal from Casemiro, an amazing goal. This was highlight worthy. This is something that you see like a number 9 do.
unbelievable goal. Yeah,
And this is I think it's Man United at its peak here. Because the move starts with Casemiro, passing it to Ericsson, and then Ericsson does a feint to kind of go upfield and passes it to Bruno's feet. So you get Ericsson to Bruno, and Ericsson finding Bruno's feet, not doing something over the top, not and then Bruno tries a cross, it's blocked, and Sancho wins the ball back off a Bournemouth player. I think it's John Brooks, or David Brooks. Sancho tries a cross. The cross is defended, but the ball falls to Christian Eriksen, who then has time to look up and float a perfect ball into the box to Casemiro, where Senese is able to get a foot on the ball to kind of stop the cross. You imagine only for Casemiro to like turn his body and volley it, almost like something Ronaldo would have done, to be honest.
yeah,
Um, but
unbelievable.
the ball that Christian Eriksen plays is equally impressive because when you freeze frame when it happens, it's hard to tell what Eriksen is seeing. Casemiro has just kind of started to do that run. It's almost like Ericsson just like looked up and tried to hit it into like a little pocket of space, and he was like, maybe someone will get there. And you
Yeah,
wouldn't imagine Casemiro to be that kind of player, but this is unreal
no,
vision
yeah,
by Ericsson. And
yeah,
this was the
absolutely.
this was the decider. Uh, uh, because not a ton happened in this game. What's weird is maybe player of the game after that was David De Gea. David De Gea actually had a couple really big saves. Uh, to
Yeah,
to
and
uh,
with the
to be
shutout, he's Golden Gloves
to be fair to
too.
him, yeah.
Really kind of weird considering he's made a couple like high profile errors recently.
Well, he's always
But
been
yeah, I mean,
he-
props to him.
he's always been good. Well, he had that one error, I guess, versus West Ham.
Yeah.
He had that really bad, I guess, hand save. It kind of just went under him. He's always
Mhm.
been really good with his saves. It's just kind of been his distribution and kind of he's never really been able to pass from the back. But I think you're
Yeah.
right, and it's fitting that De Gea is the Golden Glove winner. It's possible they might move on from him, and it's not just that they're moving on from him because of those errors. That is some of it. I think he's eclipsed Schmeichel, he's eclipsed all of them for being the longest, having the most appearances as a United keeper. I think he was always close to that. I think in the last couple of games he got it. So I mean that goes over to his legacy. He won, I think, United a title by himself. Uh,
Yeah.
he was like player of the season as a keeper. In like 2013, I feel like. Um,
Yeah, he was amazing for a couple seasons. Absolutely amazing.
And with United, I mean, Champions League looks wrapped up. They have the EFL Cup win, FA final still to play in Ten Hag's first season. Now I'm hoping maybe we'll see Chelsea kind of do something, pull a rabbit out of a hat, because all United has to do is get a point in these next few games. But they have to get through two London clubs, so we'll see. If United don't get a point versus Chelsea, it does go to the final game with them in
Mhm.
Liverpool. But yeah, this probably is wrapped up. And again, we've spoken about a couple managers, doing an amazing job. What Ten Hag's done, they brought in Casemiro. Obviously, that really was the change in the in their outlook. But what they also did is they
Mhm.
showed Ronaldo the door, and they took Harry Maguire went from being the captain to benching him. And these weren't
Yeah.
easy decisions. And then another thing
Right,
that
absolutely.
this hasn't been an easy season for Eric Ten Hag. He lost Christian Eriksen to injury. These last few games down the stretch, he hasn't had Rashford. So to be able to, because I look at this United squad and I've been kind of discounting them the entire season, to be honest.
Yeah.
If Alex was here, he'd be like yelling at me a little bit. But they do control their fate. And to be honest, down the stretch, these last few games, given the Lissandro Martinez injury, the partnership between Lindelof and Varane has been really, really good. And even when Varane was in missing, I thought Lindelof and Shaw actually did a
Mm.
pretty decent job to hold a couple clean sheets. And
Yeah,
so
they really did. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, they did a good job together. And they hadn't played together much either, so that was impressive as well.
oh Shaw, I
And,
can't remember.
yeah, I mean, it's been a great season for him, though. If,
I can't remember
like, they
Shaw
already
being
won 1 trophy, so
I can't remember Shaw being tried as a center back ever.
wow,
And
yeah.
he had a couple decent games, and they are linked to Min Jae Kim, as we mentioned, of Napoli. And he is a left-footed, center back. So I'm
A great
curious.
signing, yeah.
I'm curious if it's not just Harry Maguire that's kind of on the minds here. Do you maybe try Lautaro Martinez as like a fake left back playing inverted, doing the Pep thing with him? Because I feel like
Mm.
he would almost maybe benefit that role a little bit more. That'll maybe be something we see next year or not. Because I know they tried that versus Aston Villa with Valencia, and Martinez I feel like would be a better person to do that. I guess you could try that with Shaw as well. But there's some interesting things to maybe see with that. And again, they just need a point versus Chelsea or Fulham. Crazier things have happened, but I'm not counting my chickens. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think so, Ben. Unfortunately for Liverpool.
Yep, yep. Yeah, there we go. I mean, do you have anything to maybe kind of say with Bournemouth? I mean, I think they gave things a go. They competitive. And
Yeah.
missing Billing. Uh,
Mhm.
and missing Rothwell. But maybe we'll talk about this. It was cool to see David Brooks back, and I don't know if this is just kind of a feel good story. Maybe we'll just kind of give him a couple of games because it doesn't mean anything now, or not. Because he had leukemia, I think.
Mhm.
So he's come back from cancer, and yeah, before this, he was actually he was a real prospect. And it was when they got relegated. I think he was under Eddie Howe. Um,
Mm.
but before that, he was one of their more creative, kind of clever young English players. And
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know what he can be, what he can offer them, going forward. But at least to see him get a couple minutes here and there, And he had a shot. He forced the hair into a save.
Absolutely.
This was unique and good to see.
Yeah, definitely, and good for Bournemouth. You know, they had as many wins as Chelsea, which is kind of crazy. But going forward next year, 70 goals conceded. It's the most in the Premier League. They got to figure out, what to do with that defense. And I mean, they could use a little bit more goals too. But 70 goals conceded, with still one more to play, is a lot of goals. If they can figure that out, I think they'll be in good shape for year two in the Prem.
Well, one thing that we have seen as well for the last two games is we saw this new guy, Zabanieri, kind of get a start. He's a 6'2" center back they got from Dynamo Kiev. And
Mhm.
there was a chance that happened with Anthony that I feel like we should highlight because it was a good chance for United to maybe kill off the game. Ranghorst did a good job to play Anthony the ball in acres of space on the right side. Anthony shows good pace to get there. But also Zabanieri does a really good job to sprint back and he's able to close off Anthony. Now, if Anthony has a right foot, this probably is a goal. But because he doesn't, he tried to cut it onto his left, and Zabanieri was able to sprint back. And once he stopped it onto his left foot, he was able to get a foot in there.
Mhm.
But the pace that as this guy Zabanieri showed was quite impressive.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
there's some of that. The main thing I think about is I don't know if Neto is a loan or not. The keeper from Barcelona,
Oh, yeah. I think he is.
because the guy after him, Tavers, is I don't think is nearly the same keeper. Another thing too is they gave up more goals than I think anyone when it came to set pieces
Ooh.
or close. They were awful
Yeah.
all year. They've got to find a way to fix that. 'Cause if
Mhm.
not, I kind of do fear that we probably would be here again. You mentioned how Eddie Howe was maybe up there for Coach of the Year. I have Gary O'Neill. I don't think he's even been nominated
I like
to
that though.
keep this side up has been unreal. And they did have a couple. They did bring in some people in January. Watatara came in,
Mhm.
which was able to help out. They also had they brought in a couple others. Hamid Traore and Anthony Semeno. But they weren't necessarily able to kind of break into the 11. And we saw Solanke kind of being picked over Kiefer Moore after January, and then another change that happened was well, I won't say another change that happened. Something that happened to them was they didn't really have a Tavernier for a lot of the
Oh,
season,
right.
A-
Yeah, and he was
and
really playing on fire before he got hurt too.
so to get him back is going to be a big player for them as well. You imagine they probably keep him, and so maybe Bournemouth will be able to give it a go and stay up again next season. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Because there are a couple teams we'll get to. I think Wolves comes to my mind where I'm less bullish on their future. If they well, they have stayed up because I think I saw like Lopetagre's future is all of a sudden in question because he doesn't know if they're going to have funds. Apparently, they might be hurting with financial fair play, and that's not good because I look at their squad. They need reinforcements. So
Yeah, definitely.
we'll see what the future holds with the teams being promoted because it's going to be two teams that have done some amazing things on a budget in Coventry and Luton Town. So
Oh, right. Interesting.
who are the others that have? It's Burnley, and Burnley have at least never had really
Sheffield.
owners that are right Sheffield. So we'll see what that holds for them next year.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
And so we'll move on to I don't really want to talk about this game. Liverpool and Aston Villa. Well, I'll talk about a little bit what happened afterwards. Really, it was it was 1-1. I was because Man United was winning their game. That made it a little bit easier to stomach. Watkins missed a PK early on, and then Jacob Ramsey was able to make it a 1-0. It looked like this was going to be a massive fumble. It was Bobby Firmino's last game. They were saying that "Si Senor" chant the entire time, and lo and behold, Klopp subbed him on, and he scores. This was, if it had been like the game winner, this would be storybook. But yeah, we'll get. I'm gonna spend a little time to talk about Firmino a little bit after that. But I think another thing that was kind of weird was a story going into the game was Klopp getting a punishment on the touchline for his touchline reactions for Spurs, and it was weird. I don't want to go conspiracy theory on here, but some of the decisions in this game went against Liverpool it felt like there was an agenda to it. There was a
Mhm.
Mings foot on Gakpo, where Mings puts his footprint on Gakpo's chest. And I guess it can be interpreted as something different, but I thought for sure that was a red. And then I think there was the most insane interpretation of offsides I think I've seen to date, which we'll get to because Gakpo did score later in the game. It was called off because they assumed that Taiwan Ming's a ball would kind of bounce off him, and it looked like it was inadvertent. He didn't try to play it because there was a
Mm,
goal that was given in the Crystal Palace game with Joe Ward. The exact same happened with Anthony Robinson, and that goal was given with absolutely zero controversy. I'm surprised that this hasn't gotten a little bit more attention. It was a big moment because it happened in like the 60th minute and it would have made it 1-1. At this point, Aston Villa were doing kind of the same thing, just playing in a deep block, being very well, being organized. Tywin Mings, I think should have been sent off, and it's unfortunate as well because he was maybe man of the match. He had a number of amazing clearances, and he was always getting in the way, winning the ball back. And the only thing I can say that kind of keeps me grounded a little bit here is the ref had plenty of times to send Fabinho off as well for like 8 yellows, and he didn't get a yellow until like really late. So there's that. But uh,
mm.
this was
Yeah.
it's weird because I mentioned last week I thought Villa playing this like high line I thought was going to just play into what Liverpool want to do. And instead, Liverpool weren't able to get the pass right. Trent kept overhitting stuff. Diaz kept running, wasn't able to run onto the ball. Salah either. And it's more times than not what they were doing is just giving the ball straight away. So Villa's high line in the beginning worked out, and then they actually were a little bit more compact in the second half. They didn't care about the ball. I think they had 120 passes.
Mm,
They got the goal and they were able to kind of sit with it, and Liverpool weren't able to. Again, it was another one of those instances where they weren't able to break it down. I'm gonna get to another take. It was finally the first time I saw where someone like Mason Mount would help. Someone
mm.
with he's got he's got an ability to score from midfield. That's something that they have dearly lacked all this time. Obviously, I think Darwin Núñez maybe would have helped out as well, or Jota. It's weird that Klopp keep Diaz came back from injury. Since that happened, it seemed Diego Jota was more on the back burner a little bit, and so I think that was
Mm,
maybe Klopp maybe messed up a little bit there as well.
mm. Yeah, possibly.
I mean, yeah, it was 10 shots and 5 on target, only 5 on target. Villa was 6 shots and three, and again the pass. They had 178 passes, so that's not terrible. Or at least compared to what we've seen. Far as did put up some
Mm.
numbers that I've never seen before. So there's that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, same here.
I think for Liverpool with we'll get started with like Firmino's last game. Because they're not just missing you're losing a club legend, someone amazing for vibes. Basically, I think he's the player of the Klopp era in many respects. He's maybe the player that's kind of changed how people look at the false nine position or the forward position. Which would
Yeah.
maybe we're kind of getting away from that, but he's worth that praise as well. But he added 10 league goals, and these goals were relatively big. They came in big moments. Um,
That's true.
Darwin
Yeah.
Núñez and Gakpo are going to need to improve significantly next season. Luis Diaz needs to experience something else. They need to improve their end product because it's not you're losing 10 goals in the side. That's not going to be easy to replace. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that they're so big too. Big goals are hard to score.
Yeah, a lot of these goals, especially in the beginning of the season, he was maybe their player of the season before the World Cup because I think he had 7 or 8 goals before the World Cup. He obviously he had his injuries and whatnot. I remember he scored a big goal versus Arsenal. They didn't get anything in that game, but I remember it was a big moment. Yeah, he still has some game. Just his legs kind of ask him to press, and he wasn't able to kind of do the Klopp brand.
Yeah.
As his body
High
body has
press.
gone. It does
Yeah.
the McAllister links continue to be a thing. So that is interesting to me. The way that Klopp's kind of changed things around, bringing McAllister in, I think works as a controller or an attacking mid. We've seen him play higher up for Brighton, and the Mason Mount links continue to kind of be a thing. And again, I can't remember the last time that Liverpool have had a reliable goal scoring midfielder. I do think
Mm,
I have to go back to Coutinho. Uh,
continue.
and it's just there's some games that Liverpool the games that Liverpool can't manipulate spaces to get their attacking front players in behind, they struggle. They've struggled for like 4 or 5 years. There was a quote Carlo Ancelotti after the Champions League final that basically said the same thing. They've struggled to break teams down that way. And one way to kind of do that is again having a goal scoring midfielder or someone that can shoot from distance. The other thing too is just kind of bullying people in the box. And so someone like Darwin Núñez, I think they would have gotten a goal in that game playing Gakpo and Darwin Núñez together. So I think there
Yeah.
was kind of there's a lost opportunity to kind of to do that. Unfortunately, and until maybe Diaz needs to he just came back from injury. I think sidelining Jota for Diaz I don't think has necessarily worked out. So because Jota has that instinct to just kind of be there, and he also has a shot on him. So
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
but I mean, real quickly, it's Firmino's last game, and I did speak a little bit about after Man United. I thought what he meant to the squad and club, and I do he in many ways he did revolutionize the position. And the reason why I think he's the player of the Klopp era. People are gonna think of Salah probably, or maybe Van Dijk or even Allison, but
Mhm.
they got to a point when Klopp came. The first thing he did was he took an out of form wide player who was struggling for goals, struggling for playing time, and basically, he sat Sturridge, basically a guy that had just gotten 20 goals in the league or 18, and he recognized the Firmino's what Firmino offered to recognize to press without the ball, to work without the ball, and his ability to just kind of create in the midfield. What that did is that changed everything, because Firmino was so good at that. Klopp basically turned his midfield after he lost Coutinho into basically, hey, either be workhorses, work without the ball, but also do when the fullbacks go high, your job is to cover for the fullbacks. Your job is to not create. Your job is to not be a playmaking midfielder, and that's how he was able to win so much with Henderson and Gino Ronaldo and Fabinho, not a creative midfielder because you had someone like Firmino that was able to kind of be that link up, to be that guy that was able to kind of, make things happen when really it shouldn't have. And when he
Mhm.
was in the box, he was magic with his touches, the way he was able to set up Mane and Salah. You think of someone else in that position, maybe they would have wanted to score more goals, and maybe if that would have happened, maybe that front three wouldn't have worked. But because he had that unselfish ability to kind of, he didn't care about getting the limelight, uh, it really allowed Mane and Salah to shine as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Good point.
and it's because of his decline that Klopp's formula hasn't worked anymore, and that's the reason why I think Klopp has decided to kind of change things up finally, because you can't if you don't have someone with Firmino's ability to link up and be that creative player, but that can also kind of do stuff in the box. What that happens is you're left with midfielders that kind of don't work in some respects. So I think that's the reason why maybe they're targeting a different kind of midfielder, a different kind of player that we've seen in the past. You don't see them trying to go for who's the next Henderson. You're seeing someone a little different, like who's the next Thiago, who's someone that can be a little bit more uh, a little more better on the ball, clever on the ball. So we'll see.
Yeah. We'll see what happens.
And then it was Milner, Oxlade Chamberlain, and Naby Keita's final home game as well. And I've always kind of wondered what an alternate universe it would be if Ox hadn't gotten injured versus Roma in the Champions League semifinal, because I don't feel like he ever recovered there. I think he was a Henderson replacement. And then another thing too is Liverpool didn't lose games when Naby Keita was able to play. When it was him and Thiago and Fabinho, that NFT midfield was really really good, and that's kind of the reason why Liverpool had a really good stretch towards last season. Naby Keita was able to actually Naby Keita and Thiago were able to give it a go a little bit, and to end with Milner, I'm not going to have any of the English slopfest over him.
Mhm.
How great a professional and fit he is. There's none of that. He needed to retire a long time ago. I'm glad he's finally leaving. I think he's cost Liverpool silverware because those times when Henderson and him have played together, Liverpool have dropped points, yeah, especially in midfield. Maybe he's been able to do a job and be a general when he's played at fullback. But because he played versus Man City when they actually beat Man City, which crazy enough they didn't have Trent that game. But no, when he's been come on to midfield, he fouls. Klopp, Alex likes to think of him as like a kind of like a hockey player. Like he's like the bully guy essentially. And just
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't he played too many. He got too many minutes and every single year, I think it got to a point where maybe there was something in his contract where he like if he got an appearance because he's close to getting the most appearances ever for a player. And so what Klopp was doing is it got to a point where every 80th minute or so he would bring Milner on to get that appearance, and I think that
Mhm.
was hurting as well. So I'm
Mm.
yeah, goodbye Milner. And it look he's linked to Brighton. I don't necessarily know if that'll happen, but we'll see. And then with Aston Villa, the positives, I think that midfield is quite interesting. With Kamara, Ramsey, Douglas Luiz, and John McGinn. And I think so Emery's got something interesting to play with next season. Another thing too is I think he's improved John McGinn. I used to think he was a liability,
Yeah.
and he looks really good. And then Douglas Luiz is a Champions League level player. Maybe if Newcastle has the wherewithal, maybe I would try him and
Mm.
and Bruno together. Because it seems like he's allowed when he flies when he's allowed to play in a pivot. And I think he's criminally underrated. I think he gets assists. He has a great he actually had the ball floated in for the back post for the here. He scored a free kick last week. He has goals in him as well. And I just he never looks like he's pressed into making errors when he's on the ball. He's a good player. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I think he is a really good player, yeah.
and yeah, Tyron Mings was maybe man of the match, and I didn't necessarily love Villa's tactics, but it worked. And one thing to maybe say is Unai Emery nearly got the better of Klopp last year in the Champions League. It was his Villarreal side. They lost the first leg, I think 2-0. They almost got it. Did they tie it to 2-2? I think they did. And they
Can't
at
remember.
they oh well, there we go. It gave Klopp a scare last year with his Villarreal team. And Villa did a really good job to bring him to the EPL, and we'll see if
I think so, yeah.
Villa are able to maybe get the final Europe spot, the final Conference League spot, because I feel like it's still maybe in their grasp. I don't know if they needed to win this game or not, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think they'll get there, but yeah, if they lose, I think another team could definitely overtake them. But they'd be interesting in Europa because I mean Emery's kind of a Europa League specialist,
Because
so and he's got the team playing really well too. So
it's
be
them.
interesting to see.
Well,
Brighton, I think, right?
Brighton
Brighton's
already
in Europa already.
got one. I think it's them. It's
Yeah,
between them, Brentford, and Spurs, right?
yeah, yeah. I think so. I know Brentford's has a chance to get in there, which would be crazy.
Because of what happened on the weekend as well.
Hmm.
And so we'll try to move this up a little bit. Leeds and West Ham. This was the funny one because Leeds get the first goal, and it's a really good goal from Rodrigo. Leeds started, I thought, the better side, and then which made sense. West Ham going with the 11 was surprising. With the number of players that he went with. But it was also surprising because a number of those players played on Thursday in a rough, Conference League semifinal. And so it made sense that they started off a little slow, but what's weird is after Leeds got the first goal, I don't remember Leeds really threatening after that. And just anytime they lost the ball, they were vulnerable. West Ham were very good
Absolutely.
at going from defending to immediately transitioning into attack. It's probably the best that their attack has looked. You know, uh, Fornals was doing a good job leading, running with the ball. Declan Rice was doing a good job to win the ball, and Jared Bowen was another guy that was kind of just really good at making runs and just kind of being a pest and in a good way. And
Yeah, yeah.
it was 3-1. It could have been worse. Rubbles made a couple saves to maybe
He
keep
did,
Leeds
yeah.
somewhat in this, but Leeds also lost Patrick Bamford. I think early in the first half. After that, it just seemed Leeds had no way to keep the ball, and it was just if they were going to get anything out of this, it was going to be a slop fest. And West Ham actually had some real good quality. It was maybe the name I haven't said is Lucas Paqueta. I think this is maybe
Mhm.
his best game. He looked amazing with the
He was
ball
good.
at his feet, and
Yeah,
the
he
third
was
goal
really good.
happens with a very good assist from him.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And West Ham, they did what they wanted to do on Thursday. They have a chance to play in another Europe finals. Conference League, and they'll play. You mentioned Fiorentina, and something Alex texted is Serie A has got a final in each competition, which is
Yeah.
good for them because I think people have maybe been kind of underplaying them a little bit. I've kind of been one of those snobs. I didn't think the Inter and AC Milan Champions League tie was necessarily appealing. I didn't think that was necessarily the
Yeah.
best advertisement for Serie A football, but that
Mhm.
said, this is quite an accomplishment for
Yeah,
them. So yeah.
it really is. Roma in the Europa League as well. So yeah,
hmm And that
it's
was
crazy. Yeah, it's crazy to think about. But
apparently they were able to advance by basically another. I don't want to say the T word again. Jose Mourinho kind of football. I don't think they had a single shot the entire game. They faced like 20 of them, and they were able to just kind of get a clean sheet, and that was enough for them to advance.
yeah,
Um,
just enough. Mm.
I mean, we don't necessarily have to talk necessarily about the game. Let's see. Actually, we'll start with Leeds. We'll speak about West Ham maybe tomorrow. I mean, because I think maybe from like minute 70 on, Leeds never even looked competitive. I think that was the problem. And there was like no moments I thought that caused West Ham trouble by Leeds like running at West Ham. I feel like their legs look absolutely shot. And if anything, I would have thought that West Ham's legs would have been the ones that were tired, especially the players that were playing. And
Yeah,
it was the opposite. And I don't know if the team overall
yeah,
has
that's true.
gotten their legs shattered under Biesla and Marsh, and maybe they just never recovered. But it's weird that they don't look fit to me. And
Mm.
it's not just that they're conceding goals. With Biesla, they were playing this open game, invited teams with any kind of space they wanted. If they could bypass an intense Leeds press, in here, they're just sitting off teams. They're inviting teams to kind of enter the final third and then make runs unchallenged in the box. That's where like the Declan Rice goal happened. They just allowed Jared Bowen to just kind of jog into the box and get a cross off. They allowed Declan Rice to get into the box unmarked. It's just you can't just sit off if you're not going to be able to defend. Forest has been able to invite teams onto them, but they were able to defend that final thing. We mentioned the Jose thing, where what Villa was able to do, kind of sitting back. It's not just it's not just uh, a lazy tactic. You still have it still requires a lot of work and a lot of uh, a lot of good effort, and Leeds don't seem to have the kind of players to pull that off. So yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, I would agree. Unfortunately for Leeds.
it was 19 shots and 6 or 7 saves by Rubbles, good saves. Leeds did have 12 shots and 3 on target. I don't think they had a shot on target though in the second half. Once Bamford went off, it was not good. It was interesting to not see Rudder again. I keep kind of going back to that, but
Yeah,
that's why it's weird.
you cost a decent amount of money to just sit on the bench when you need them.
And yeah, if they do go down, I think Nato, Somerville, and Senestera. Well, he's injured now. They'll get him back. That is something to build on. Maybe Rudder will help them come up next year. I think he's crazy
Maybe.
young too. I didn't realize that he's like 20 or 21. He's able to play for the
Mhm.
U21s.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. He could do really well in the championship. Honestly,
and I don't know if Brendan Aronson, I think, is maybe not necessarily for this level. He looks overpowered. He needs to work on his body a little bit. 'Cause maybe he'll benefit, Champions League, championship football. I don't think Tyler Adams would. I don't wanna necessarily be that
yeah,
kinda
yeah.
guy, but I would think maybe he could be someone that someone could maybe try to poach off. But I don't I think McKinney is only a lone player. But McKinney hasn't really worked out. And what's kind of one thing that Sam Allardyce has done is he's actually made McKinney into like a long throw-in beast. I think they get the goal from like a McKinney throw-in that Rodrigo is able to kind of smash in. McKinney hasn't necessarily been great football, but he has been a good athlete for them with those long throw-ins. Um,
Yeah, that's true. They help at times when they they don't get a lot of offense. They'll take what they can get.
and if they do go down, maybe they should just keep Sam Allardyce. I don't. Maybe he knows the championship. I don't really know what the long term outlook would be. It would be. I think it would be
I
crushing
have no idea.
because
Yeah,
Leeds are that club that they were up there with like the Man Uniteds in like the mid-90s, and they famously once they got relegated, they went all the way down to like the bottom for the longest time. So
Yes, true.
it's got to be a scary moment for them. I mean, they do technically have a chance, but I don't really give it a good one. Um,
No, especially against Tottenham when Everton's playing Bournemouth and Leicester's playing someone else easy. I can't remember who he said, but
and they just
yeah,
don't,
I don't give him much of a chance, honestly.
and they just don't defend. You know, Son, whoever, Richarlison, Danjuma, they're gonna Kane. I can't imagine they be able to at least keep a clean sheet. Um,
Mhm.
And, with West Ham, we mentioned Declan Rice. Everyone speaks about Declan Rice. We'll talk about Lucas Paqueta because he had 102 touches, 80% accuracy passing, 24 of 28 final third passes, and completed 4 or 5 tackles, and 3 chances created, 1 assist. And he's taken a while to kind of get going a little bit. But you
Mhm.
saw, especially in this game now, Leeds helped. You saw why this guy got caps in Qatar for Brazil. This guy, they West Ham did well to bring him in.
I think so. Yeah,
He just hasn't necessarily worked out a little bit this season, but next season he's probably someone to really watch out for.
yeah. He didn't necessarily hit the ground running, but yeah, he started to heat up, and you see moments of brilliance where you're like, okay, this is going to be a proper player. So yeah, he just needs to be more consistent, and I think that'll come with more time in the Premier League.
And then we'll move on to Everton and Wolves. 1-1 is the game, and you texted something that you said it's dice time.
Oh yeah,
I was curious. I thought you were saying something negative, and no, they get a goal from Yuri Mina in like the 90th plus 9 minute. I didn't watch the game live, so
yeah.
I don't get why they got 9 minutes. Uh,
Oh, I watched it live. Yeah, that's why I said it's Dutch time when they scored.
because I was watching
uh,
the Liverpool game. Liverpool got like 10 minutes at a time to play with as well, which was interesting.
yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, on TV, they actually were able to switch to the end of this Everton game, and then at the end of that, they were able to switch to the end of the Liverpool game. So, yes.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, both times it was like both teams plus 10 minutes
so,
stoppage time.
so
What?
people on NB or USA were able to watch the Everton thing live. Um,
Yeah, and then the Liverpool ending too. Yeah, pretty cool.
I mean, I thought Everton started off pretty well. A couple of chances for Calvert Lewin. First comes from a free kick, kind of looped in, and he gets a rebound. He just hits the side of the net, and then there's a cross from Iwobi that he wasn't able to keep the header down. Maybe he could do a little bit better here, but Wolves get the first goal, and the player to talk about, I think, without a doubt, the most player that has confounded me, I would say, is Adama Traore
Mhm.
because it's plays like this that you just feel like he could do much more than he does. He also doesn't play enough. Regardless of the manager that he has, he at Barcelona he didn't play. Who was Nuno Espirito didn't necessarily fancy him either, and then Bruno Lage
Yep.
didn't necessarily fancy him nearly as much. So I don't know what it is, but this
August.
goal comes from this. Decore loses the ball, gives the ball to Wolves, but the ball finds the Traore like 70 yards away from goal, and all he does is he sees empty space and just kind of hits the B button on sprint and just goes all the way upfield past Everton players. I think Onana tries to get a touch in and has no chance, and he gets the shot off. It's saved by Pickford, and then just the rebound falls to Rang for the easy putback. But I don't understand why he doesn't have more end product than he's had. I think he went a season where he only had like 1 assist for like 2 seasons maybe. It's just weird.
Yeah.
Such a weird bizarre player, but when he's on, yeah, he's video game like.
Mhm.
And then there were a couple chances that most of the chances actually did fall to Wolves. Podence had a chance, Sarabia, Podence again. And then Nunes had a chance to really kind of kill the game off. There was kind of a breakaway moment, and he drives at James Garner, and then passes it to Cunha, and then they get into the Everton box, and I think Cunha or Neves tries to beat Pickford, but Pickford sticks a leg out last minute to stop it, and that was the key save.
Mhm.
And
Great
then
save. Yeah, that
in
was a
like
great save.
the 90th minute, came a corner kick. Demorge forced a corner kick. Nothing comes from the corner kick, but Everton get a throw in. And what happens when here is Wolves kind of sit off Demar Gray after the ball throws into him, and he sees no one pressuring him. He actually like goes backwards. You see him like walk backwards to get the power to get this cross off because he's like 35 yards out. And the flight confuses Bentley. So the keeper tries to punch the ball and he misses. Tarkovsky does a good job, I think, to like force the error. And Tarkovsky, I think, maybe wins the header and like knocks the ball back, and then it's the other center back, uh, Michael Keane, who like follows it up and crosses the ball in, and it's like center back to center back to center back. Yori Mina is able to kind of just get the pinball to go in. And this happened. This was like if Everton do stay up, this is one of those storybook moments. Something happened last year for Crystal Palace. I remember with like Calvert Lewin just got a crazy, or it was might have been Michael Keane as well. Got a crazy goal to help them stay up versus Crystal Palace in a
Mhm.
last minute stretch, or it might have been Iwobi. Iwobi had like a 100th minute goal versus I think it was Leeds. That was the game when someone was pinned themselves to a post. There was like a 15
Oh,
minute
right.
delay.
Yeah.
Iwobi got a late goal in kind of a similar fashion to help them stay up then. So
Mhm.
I mean, it was a fairly even game. 13 shots and 5 on target, 19 and 4 for Everton. I think the issue though was once Calvert-Lewin went off, they brought Demara Gray on. They didn't even try Marpai, and they did struggle. And they're gonna have to win. They're gonna have to beat Bournemouth. And other than like finding a way to kind of get something on a corner kick, get something off a set piece, I don't really know what they're gonna do. They also lost Nathan Patterson in this game, the fullback, and they tried Dwight McNeil as the left back. Uh, you know, they're hurting everywhere, and obviously losing Calvert Lewin doesn't necessarily help. So
Yeah.
Tarkovsky, Keane, and Yemena created this goal. They're gonna have to do something spectacular. Next week. Decore was able to help them versus Brighton. Maybe Decore can step up. I don't really know what they're
Yeah,
gonna
he could. Or
do
will
uh
be, yeah.
do for goals. I mean, McNeil had an amazing goal versus Brighton, like the fifth goal. But if you're playing it as a fullback, I don't think that necessarily helps out there. I'm glad I'm not Sean Dyche. But he's done a decent job to get them to at least they control their fate. You want to be the team that controls your fate going into the final game,
Yeah,
and they do.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not considering it's not a bad situation to be in. Considering you could win and still not control your own destiny, at least that's better than that. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe Malpe will have to have a good for them to stay up.
That
That
would
wouldn't
be
feel good if you're an Everton fan, but you
Well, there we
never
go.
know.
Well, there we go. That would be a nice kind of storybook to kind of end on because he's come in he's come in from Brighton. And that's another player that they've sold and they've had no issues. No issues missing him, and
Mhm.
he's just really flopped, unfortunately.
He really has.
Uh,
Yeah.
and to touch on Wolves, I think we mentioned it last week, or I guess both of us agree. Like the job that he's done has been incredible because he kept them up after taking over when they were bottom place. And it looks like his future might be in question. They made some weird comments. They don't know if they'll bring him back. He's upset to hear that they don't have investment plans in place.
Mm.
They're and a number of their players are coming out of contract. And you look at the squad is kind of I think it looks famished or it looks weak in
Mm.
many areas, especially at striker spot.
Yeah.
So that none of that sounds good. And if to kind of turn this around a little bit, if Lopetegui is kind of let go, decides to like walk away, uh, in like 2018 or 20 before they got Greg Bolter, Lopetegui mentioned he was interested in the U.S. spot.
Mm.
And I know it's probably going to be Jesse Marsh's to have. Uh, I'd be interested to see if the U.S. would at least think about because he does speak English. I don't think that's gonna be a barrier. It'd be interested to see if they'd be interested to
Mm.
at least interview him, or if he would be interested in doing that. So we'll necessarily see. I'll kind of throw that out there. But
Mm. Yeah.
if Wolves lose him, that would be uh-oh. Most definitely. Of all the teams, I think Wolves are the team I think that are in the most precarious spot, even though they've stayed up relatively comfortably. Um,
Mm. Yeah.
and then we'll move on to Spurs and Brentford. This one ends 3-1. Spurs get the first goal with an amazing Harry Kane goal. This was very similar to what Liverpool did with like Trent a couple weeks ago versus Leicester. That kind of free kick. And then I don't think Brentford had even a shot on goal in the first half. And then Thomas Frank brought on a Damsgaard. We spoke about him a little bit last week. We thought he had maybe his best game for Brentford, and he came in and had a big kind of a play that helped them get the first goal. He's a nice he gets the ball from a throw and no one's marking him. That's kind of weird. And
Mhm.
then he does a really good job to get the ball to find Weiss's feet, and then Weiss gets it to him, Bremo, and then Ben Davis has decided not to mark in Bremer in the box. I don't really understand why. And Bremer gets the first goal. He then gets a second one, and then Weissa gets a third, with Bremer doing a really nice dribble into the box and then doing a FIFA pass.
Mhm.
And yeah, the leading off story is the Tony ban is official. January 2024. We've seen a couple of games now where Brentford have played without Tony, and their attack still looks good.
Yeah, and Bumo has really stepped up in those games as well. And we know he's a good provider, assists, but we didn't think he really had this like potency in front of goal. Because it's a bunch of goals in the last couple games without Tony with that hamstring problem. So yeah, I don't know if he's the solution for half the season next year. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but it seems pretty clear that Thomas Frank and Brentford really want to keep a hold of Tony,
Mhm.
and they're willing to just be patient and wait until I think the exact date is January 17th, I think. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe Mbuma will fill in the role. Maybe they'll use Shada as well because
Well, that's
he's
something.
pretty good. I don't know if he'll score a lot,
Well,
but
that's something I wanted. Well, I did ask Jeremy, and he gave me an interesting answer. Because Shada's only on loan. I didn't realize that, and to keep him
oh,
will require them to break a club record. Transfer. I think it's like 25 million. Uh,
really?
25 million for a relatively unproven player, and he hasn't necessarily hit the ground running per se. I think that would be risky. But again, I
Hmm.
don't. You'd have to. I don't know where they would go elsewhere. They would have to, especially if you're playing a formation that has a front three attacking. You need to have that third player because I don't think Damsgaard's that kind of player. And one thing that was interesting was to hear Thomas Frank's comments at the end, and this is why having that third player is important because he said he wanted three to press Spurs high. He didn't think he could do it with two. That's the reason why he went with a 4-3-3.
Right.
We've seen in some of these games for quote unquote big clubs, we've seen him go back to like a back five essentially. And
Hmm.
the Shada, Weissa, and Mbeumo were actually really big in helping them press a little bit. And some of these goals came from them winning the ball back, playing a little higher up in the second half. They were maybe sitting back a little bit in the first half. Spurs relatively were really good in the first half. I thought, yeah, Brentford, I don't think had a shot in that first half. It really was a tale of two halves. But once Brentford were able to kind of press Spurs a little bit into making some mistakes, that's where you saw maybe the Spurs midfield of Skip and Basuma didn't work at all.
Yeah.
That's been a problem their entire season. And once you saw Brentford able to kind of take on Ben Davies kind of 1v1, you saw that end up kind of showing up and being a problem.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just sometimes we talked about how bad their defense is, Tottenham, and yeah, they shift off too frequently. They just have moments where they're like not thinking or paying attention. It seems like, and then they're not the speediest either. So if you get caught, with switching off, you don't have the speed to recover and make up for it.
I mean, yeah, because some of the chances, I was taking notes like actually like watching the game live. It helped that it was like the early game. I mean, I've got a number of notes saying like they're struggling to get an out ball. They're struggling. I feel like they're missing Tony. I have that like for a number of these, in that first half, and I also have chance for Spurs. Chance for Spurs. Good save by Raya. Raya had a number of saves. Big save or big block by Ben Mee. I've got that down in a lot of these notes as well. It felt like he had a number of blocks that were big. But another thing they have is, really good play by Schlon and Kulishevsky. It seemed like by playing Danjuma,
Mhm.
he was able to play Kulishevsky in almost like a more central area, almost like a 10. At least in that first half, worked out a lot. I thought it actually worked really well, and it showed up in the chances. Spurs had a number of saves or a number of chances that at least forced a Reyes save or two. I don't necessarily know what the outlook was total, but they had 22 shots and 8 on target. Raya did have 6 saves. But I feel like the vast majority happened in the first half. I did feel like what they were doing in the first half worked until the midfield and defense wasn't able to keep the ball enough to get the ball to Kulishevsky, to get the ball to Kane. I don't remember Kane having many touches in that
Yeah,
in the second half, and
that's
so
true.
that is where that's maybe to kinda start with Spurs. Well, we'll start with Brentford, because the second half performance is a positive. Damsgaard, I think, is looking more like he can handle the physicalness of the league, maybe in midfield. I was kind of worried a little bit about that, and then Mbeumo and Wisa have a really good connection with one another, so
They
that's
do.
good as well. But
Yeah, they really do.
a clickbaity question, a hot take kind of question is if you're Brentford and you're forced to lose, if you instead of losing both, if you're able to keep one between David Raya and Tony, who do you think would be the bigger loss?
Mm. I think losing Raya just because
And
I mean they Brentford have proven that they can replace a top class striker. When they went out and they got Tony from Peterborough to replace Watkins,
Watkins.
who left to go to the Premier League. So I think losing Raya would be worse, honestly. Even though Tony's an amazing player, I don't want them to lose him either. But I don't know. It'd be tough to fill the gap that Raya would leave. He's been so good, and he's been so good for a while. He's part of the reason why they're even in the Premier League to begin with. So, yeah, I think losing Raya would hurt more, just because Brentford have a bit of a track record of replacing quality strikers with another, lesser known quality striker that grows into the role.
Yeah, no, Jeremy had the same answer, and he what he said was interesting as well because he remembered last season when
Yeah,
Brentford had a really
he
rough
left. He got hurt.
stretch after like November all the way through to like maybe February.
Mhm.
And Brentford kind of turned that around. Tony ended up scoring a little bit towards the end. They got Ericsson. Ericsson kind of turned
Mhm.
things around
Erickson
as
was a
well.
big part.
But
Yeah.
what happened was they got Raya back from injury. And it all kind of coincided, and it all kind of mixed into the same kind of bucket. And Raya was really big when they were missing him. Jamie was like they look a relegated side,
Mhm.
essentially. So
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think he did make the most saves of the entire league this year. Um, another thing I wanted to ask you is, this is less kind of a uh, how should I say it? This is another stupid question, but this is more kind of a way to kind of just talk up Benway, essentially. But I was kind of wondering, do you think Burnley stay up if Benway hadn't have broken his leg in late March? I feel
No.
like I feel like there was a game for Spurs where someone like Nathan Collins, Ben Mee's replacement, I think had a bad foul, and that's the reason why they ended up losing to Spurs. Just in that one like play. He was like captain at Burnley. It wasn't Tarkovsky. I feel like Tarkovsky kind of looked a different player down the stretch. Ben Mee, I think, is criminally underrated.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
He's able to play in a back three. He's able to play in a back two. He maybe doesn't have necessarily the best pace to him, but he's always in the right spot. He reads the game well, in my opinion. And he's come in and he's been a signing of the summer. To have we were worried about Brentford being a relegated spot.
Yeah.
We're worried
Yeah, when
about
they
them
lost Erickson.
replacing Ericsson, and here
Mhm.
they are. They have a chance to get a Europe spot. It's been
Yeah.
it's been unreal, and a lot
It
of that
really
has
has been.
been we mentioned Ray has been able to save a lot. But Ben Mee and at Pennick have been really really well. Jamie was like in the beginning Ben Mee was maybe struggling a little bit with pace playing with Janssen, Pontus Janssen. But once they got Pennick back, that Ben Mee and Pennick partnership worked out really well.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it's something to build on in the future too, hopefully.
And then the next phase I think for Brentford is finding a way to play better with the ball. That's been a little bit of an issue. I think Jeremy is worried about that as well. It's sometimes they're just too poor in possession. Obviously missing Norgard. Norgard probably helps with that. Janssen has been
Mhm.
has been a good midfielder with that. But maybe they need something else. Like it feels like someone like Josh Da Silva is really good, like running with the ball, progressing with the ball. But he's a runner. He's not really the best passer. I feel like Onyeka can maybe do a job defensively, but he's not necessarily that kind of player as well. And one name that kind of keeps coming on the list. Well, actually, maybe I should say him for Spurs as well. Is a guy that's at Middlesbrough in Hayden Hackney.
Mhm.
So I don't necessarily know if they'll look there. But I feel like that's maybe someone that they should look at. And what's funny is I'm going to mention him for Spurs as well. Just someone that can be a DM or CM, but someone that's just that can turn on the ball. Someone that's really good at picking a completing progressive passes. His F brief at least says he does that. Championship tax, but still. Um, but to move on to Spurs, they go from. So last week I was like, well, every single week is the same with Spurs. They never show up in the first half, and then they give it a go in the second half. And lo and behold, they
Mhm.
showed up in the first half, and then it was the second half that ended up kind of flopping. I don't get why they can only play one half of good football. I did.
Yeah, I don't get it.
I mean,
It's crazy.
I think the midfield prevents them from ever being able to control games. That's the only thing I can think of. It was interesting. They did try something different. They did a back four with Basuma. Basuma offered them a little bit more protection. In the beginning, it worked out a little bit, but once you asked the Ben Davies to defend as a fullback, not having that third center back to be there to just in case he got burned, he got skinned, and
Ah, yeah.
yeah, it wasn't ideal. They need to improve in that midfield significantly. Even someone like Harry Winks, who's on loan at like Sampdoria, I because Skip I think had a mistake for one of the goals as well. Just I don't think it's necessarily he's necessarily at the level, and it's just kind of weird. A team that had just made the Champions League uh, was so uh, was so dry in that area of the pitch. It was weird. Losing Betancourt, no, you can't necessarily predict that, but just one injury and you're this exposed. That is poor planning. So
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, yeah. I mean, and it is worth saying, David Ray and Ben Mee were both maybe man of the match, so they at least they did give things a go. Dan Juma was interesting to see. Kulishevsky, I think as a playmaking 10, worked out. Son maybe could have done better with a couple of chances, but he was stopped by a couple of really good blocks. I mean, Harry Kane on 28 goals for this team, I think is bad. He's not the 36 or whatever that Holland has, but 28 goals. Only if he gets two versus Leeds, a really bad. Is it Leeds? No, whoever they play. Yeah, it is Leeds. If he gets two on Leeds, a really bad defensive team, he gets 30.
Mhm.
That is mad, considering how it feels like they're starved a little bit for quality. And then the story with Spurs is kind of similar to the story with Chelsea, just not having a manager the entire year, or having a manager that they were disgruntled with, and then decided to kind of move on from him has been weird. And it looks like they're kind of in a similar spot where, or maybe a different spot where you don't really know what the future is for them. The future is for Kane, or the future is for who they're going to get to manage them. It looks like they've been linked to Feyenoord boss Arne Slot. I don't know anything about him.
Hmm,
Uh,
weird.
I've been interesting. I've been surprised I haven't seen Potter's name. I've also been surprised I haven't seen Xabi Alonso's name mentioned.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, true.
but I mean, it's just for one year, they go from they have from clinching Champions League football to here, where again you look and there it looks like they're further from Chelsea, in my opinion. Even though they're maybe higher in the table, they're only higher in the table because they have Kane, where Chelsea
Yeah,
don't have anyone to score their goals. And
yeah,
then
true.
maybe flop of the year has been Basuma, which I was not expecting. I when they signed him because he was really good at Brighton, and Brighton have turned around and not missed him at all. Uh, he's injured for a little of the stretch. But he played in this game and he wasn't great. And then Skip shouldn't be playing first team football. So
Hmm.
they have issues. They have issues there. Um,
Yeah, yeah, true.
and then we got two left, so we won't necessarily
I
have
gotta
to.
go. I gotta go, Ben. I gotta go.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, 12:45 was when I had to leave. So
Let's see. Where were we?
you good to do the two teams without me?
Where were you for time? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Anything you wanna say, or just kind of bounce? Well, we'll see.
Yeah, I gotta bounce.
All right, we'll see you for next week. Well, we got a
Yeah,
championship or
wrap up show.
yeah.
Wrap up show. Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for listening.
All right, bud. Take care.
Bye.
All right, and we'll move on. The final two games are Brighton and Southampton. Brighton ends up winning 3-1. Goals from Ferguson with getting a brace, and then Ellie Nuse and then Pascal Gross. The interesting thing with Brighton is they did lose 4-1 to Newcastle on Thursday, but it was only a 2-1 game in the 89th minute, and there were a couple of questionable lineup moves, you could say. Colwell was rested, McAllister was rested, Ferguson was rested, and they did have 4 games in 10 days, so there was maybe some of that. In this game, they did get Veltman back, able to play him at fullback, so that made the move to Casado more into midfield, and that allowed McAllister to play a little bit more advanced in that little number 10 role, and he gets one of the assists for the goal, so it shows he can play in multiple positions. Casado has shown he can play in multiple positions as well. He can play. He did a really good job at right back in a couple of these games. And, with Southampton did try Alcaraz and Aribo, so it wasn't just Alcaraz kind of by himself, and, Southampton did give things a go a little bit. I mean, the numbers weren't necessarily good, but they did have a chance to almost make this tied at 2. It looked like Walcott had scored a goal to make it 2-2 to come back in the game, and it was chopped off for offsides, and, it was kind of if you're a Southampton fan, that's gotta be crushing because the same thing happened last week where Alcaraz scored a goal versus Fulham. I think it would have been the first goal too in that game, and that game was also chopped off for offsides. And maybe for Southampton, the main storyline wasn't necessarily because things have already been done and dusted. The main storyline is Livermento was back on the bench, so maybe we'll actually see him get his first start and debut next week. And obviously, because they missed him. Kyle Walker Peters has had to play either on the left side or the right side. They tried Ben Bree in this game. That hasn't worked. Maitland Niles has been given a couple of these chances on the fullback spot, and that hasn't worked out at all either. And this was more a case of Southampton. Yeah, at least making things competitive somewhat. It was also a case of Brighton just being really, really good. Brighton maybe rested a couple guys versus Newcastle. The De Zerbi played his full team in this one, and they were very good. I mean, the first goal with Ferguson, Casado wins a 50-50 ball, then passes it upfield to McAllister. McAllister then passes it to Ferguson, and Ferguson takes a touch or two before firing the shot hard and low into the left corner. And the ball falls under McCarthy. McCarthy could maybe do a better job here. But the second goal comes from really Matoma kind of showing a little more of his pace. There were a couple of times where Matoma actually had a chance to score, and just because he's had the most successful take-ons in the league, but his end product is lacking. He had a shot early in the game. It went wide, and then he had another shot where McCarthy just passed him the ball, and Matoma ran onto it. Did well to recognize that, and then his chip effort just kind of hit the post and missed. But here, Matoma has a very good decision with his final ball. So he wins the ball. I think he beats Lavia, and then he sprints down the field before sending in a really nice angled ball into the box that finds Everson Ferguson, making a good run. And Ferguson finds the corner of the net. This is another really good finish by Ferguson, who is I think he's only 18 or 19, and he looks quite a player for next year. And that was kind of it. I mean, they did get the third goal from Pascal Gross. This happened like the 89th minute, so it didn't really matter that much. He gets the ball after there's like an attempted clearance from a corner kick, but no one gets tight enough to kind of close him down. He does a good job to kind of fake a shot to get a rebound to kind of bite that creates a little space. And then he has a shot that low and kisses the post, beating McCarthy. McCarthy maybe could do better. But Pascal Gross has found his shooting boots, down the stretch down this month. So that's been good to see as well. I mean, Brighton were just really, really good. I mean, Southampton didn't have a ton to play for. 5 shots and 1 on target, kind of similar to what we saw last week. That's a little misleading, I think, because Walcott did have the ball in the net where it was just kind of a heel offsides from maybe being a 2-2 game. Brighton with 26 shots and 8 on target. Brighton always have 500 plus passing with 92% accuracy. Brighton were very, very good. And maybe the one thing kind of touch on for that Walcott goal is Casado actually lost the ball to Lavia, and then Lavia did a really good job so Lavia got the better of Casado, and he does well to find James Ward-Prowse upfield, and then from there Ward-Prowse has a really good through ball, upfield that finds Walcott streaking upfield. And Walcott is just ahead of Estupiñán when James Ward-Prowse plays the ball. So Walcott maybe could have done better to hold his line. But you saw some pretty good play here from Southampton, and obviously Ward-Prowse is going to probably be someone that gets picked up. I imagine probably Lavia. I imagine as well. Uh, and so maybe we'll get started with Brighton. I mean, the game to Newcastle was closer than the score suggested, and but it doesn't. And things maybe didn't necessarily work out there, but it doesn't matter because it worked out here. They do secure that final third spot for Europa football next season, and it's a monumental accomplishment because they started off as the darling of the league. They were top four, I think, when Chelsea came along and stole their manager. And then somehow they found a gem in a replacement that honestly has made them better. I mean, frankly, it feels a season that in just a season, De Zerbi has changed how other teams in the league play. The wall passing that he does with Ferguson, that Pep's kind of copied with Holland. The playing from the back in a more threatening, attacking way. It's not just to have possession for possession's sake. It's possession to create spaces elsewhere. The ability to win the ball back as fast as any team in the league, and they're bottom 3 for distance covered. So that just shows you how well their shape always is. It confuses teams. And the ball winners in Casado and Alexis McAllister, and Gris, and then the ball winners in their center backs. The center backs, Dunk, Ferguson, and Colwell, when he's gotten a chance to play, have been quite good. Uh, and not just ball winners, though; those players are really good with the ball at their feet as well. And so it's not just a fun storyline. It's sustainable in my opinion. Now, as long as they can keep their players, Liverpool have been linked everywhere to Alexis McAllister. I imagine some teams are going to be linked to Casado, and probably a couple other players are going to be mentioned in there as well. And it's just if they can hold on to Serbi, keep hold on to at least some of their core, this feels sustainable and it's something new and different. And it's cool that it's come from a club like Brighton, of all clubs. So, we'll see what they have to offer for us next season. And speaking of something to offer next season, someone like Ferguson, something that De Zerbi did immediately, almost, that Graham Potter wasn't doing, is he gave Evan Ferguson, an 18-year-old kid, a chance. And I don't see a flaw in his game, to be honest. He has a really good first touch. He has a finish on him. Isn't afraid to tackle balls in the air. He has size, good pace to make runs in behind. And I floated last week that maybe it would be fun to see if they could float a bid for someone like Harry Kane. And Rex kind of laughed it off as nonsense, and that's a non-starter. And he's right. They maybe already have their own Kane, so they don't need to do that. He's only 18. He's only going to get better, you imagine. Now, we don't necessarily know how as he's aged, maybe we don't know how he'll be with injuries and whatnot. And under him is only Undav and Welbeck's kind of hit and miss. But in his own right, he's very, very good. And that said, it's a real shame that he wasn't able to play versus Man United in that FA game because Brighton had so many chances that they weren't able to really. It was kind of toothless in the final third, and I feel like if they had someone like Ferguson in that game, I think they would have had a little bit more teeth to their attack. And that said, they do have City this Thursday, and it could be an entertaining game. Pep's actually spoken highly of De Zerbi, to be honest, and it feels like he's copied a little bit how De Zerbi has been playing. And it's just, I think the thing with this is, it's not. It's going to feel like a preseason game. Unfortunately, neither team really has anything to play for. Brighton already have their secured spot. City already have won the league, and had Brighton just beaten Man United, we would have gotten Brighton versus City in an FA Cup final. And that I think that's the game that us fans, whatnot. That's what we should have deserved. Pep versus Roberto De Zerbi, in a final. For playing for it all. That would have been spectacular, and it is a shame that we didn't necessarily get that. Though, the FA final, the Manchester derby, I guess will be interesting as well. And then with the Crystal Palace and Fulham, this game ends 2-2. The only thing I want to touch on is Joe Ward gets a second goal, and it's very, very similar to what happened in the Liverpool game. And the ball is kind of sent in. Fulham can't clear it. It falls to Joe Ward's feet, and the first attempt is saved by the keeper. But the rebound falls kindly to him, and he puts away the rebound. But it looks he's offsides because the ball bounces off Anthony Robinson's foot, and it's ruled okay. And that's very similar to what happened in the Liverpool game. I should kind of touch on the Odegaard Edouard goal. because Palace strike first, and it's an amazing strike by Edouard. Eze gets the ball and does a really good job to kind of fool a defender, carry it upfield, and then has a nice through ball to Edouard, making a very good run. And he still has a lot to do to beat Leno, and he just has a rocket of a shot, flies through the net, and it's a very nice run by Edouard. He sprints to get ahead of Eze. One thing to touch about with Palace is they had to play this game without Zaha, and I don't necessarily know if it'll be the last game they have with Zaha. And then with Fulham, all Mitrovic has done is returned and gotten 3 goals. He gets 2 here. He had one being a PK, one a nice header, and Mitrovic has he went a little bit without scoring for a bit, but he had that suspension and he's come back. He scored last week and got 2 goals here, and that's kind of it. I mean, this I think it's kind of fitting that the stats basically say that this game was similar. These 2 teams are similar, and that kind of is what it feels like at the moment. These 2 teams are at the same level, and for Palace, that's got to be good for them because we were worried about them a little bit for down the stretch, at least back in February, and then with Fulham are a promoted side, and it looks like they don't have an issue when it comes to staying up and the way that they're playing now. Um, some of the advanced statistics suggest that this isn't necessarily sustainable for them. That they've vastly overperformed their xG, but there's no reason to necessarily be negative. I think when you touch about Fulham, you have to talk about their midfield, how good they're able to kind of win the ball back. Palace's passing wasn't really as sharp as last week. Maybe it was an outlier last week, but Fulham did a good job, I thought, to work without the ball and press and to get some turnovers and interceptions. And Harrison Reed and Polina have been excellent the entire season, and just the work rate from both of them has been very good. And then to kind of one last thing to kind of say is Fulham, Forest, and Bournemouth stay up, and I can't recall the last time that happened. I can't imagine it's a regular occurrence, and I think it's worth putting Fulham there first because uh, they've they it seems like they've had the easiest adjustment in the league than the others, and again the expected points suggest that they've overperformed a little bit, but Marcus Silva has done a tremendous job. I think Rex even mentioned he's up there as a nominee for Coach of the Year. I'm not going to say he's not deserving of that, especially because when we did Premier League predictions, I think it did have Fulham as one of the teams I had going down. I had Fulham, Bournemouth, and Southampton. So that hasn't necessarily looked too good on my end. Uh, and yeah, I mean they do look like a side that belongs, and they play some really attractive stuff. To be fair to them, yeah, there's none of this 10 men sitting in the back behind the ball. So credit to them. And then with Palace, I think the thigh injury to Palace, the thigh injury to Zaha is interesting because I don't necessarily know if that'll be the last time we see him or not because his contract is running down. But still the Iparici, Eze, Elise, and Edouard is a very potent attack, and IU offers a little something different with his work rate. Mateta is kind of hit and miss here as well. But it just seems like the core of Palace is quite exciting as a project as well. And the only thing there is we don't necessarily know what the idea is with Roy Hodgson. But he comes in, and I don't necessarily know if they've lost a game. They seem to get a point or two every single game week, and so that is it. Like Rex said, we will be back next week to talk about what happened on Championship Sunday. He said all the games are happening at once, and there's only 1 or 2 that actually matter. So maybe we don't have to do like the whole having 5 screens to watch all at the same time. Maybe I'll just kind of stick with one and maybe kind of do a channel switch. They will all be on TV, so you won't have to do the streaming. I think. So that'll be kind of nice. But that's kind of it. We don't get the title race to go to the last day. We depending what happens with Man United and Chelsea, we probably won't get the Champions League spot to go down to the last day. So it's been a fun season. I'm not going to necessarily downplay the season, but it to end a little bit in a dud is a little disappointing. And yeah, I don't want to necessarily downplay what City's accomplished, but for Arsenal to kind of push them and then to not necessarily get there, it does feel a little something's been wanting. We this has been a crazy season. With the World Cup happening, in the middle of it, it's been It's been wild throughout the whole time, and it has been fun. Not necessarily as a Liverpool fan, 'cause, things have not necessarily been great, predictably so, because of, the midfield issues. But a couple of clubs have had some issues, not necessarily seeing things that they should have. Chelsea not bringing in a striker, which was, easy to see for anyone outside, and, maybe Spurs not, showing up the midfield. That's been, that was easy to kind of see in the beginning, and then, Leeds not showing up their defense, that was easy to predict, at the beginning of the season, and, so a lot of that is kind of, panned out. So, anyways, we'll do a little, we'll run down what happened last week. We'll do maybe a kind of a final recap of the season. Maybe we'll do a little takes, there. I'll try to think of things to ask Rex, for that, and then, we'll try to do maybe something, a preview for the Champions League final. We'll try to do a show for the final, and then, that'll probably be it. So, anyways, that is what we have, left on the tank for us. And so thank you for listening. And then, I guess that's it. So for us two at the reserve squad, and we'll see you next week. You stay squatty and stop recording.